What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What is up, Fantasy Points? We are back outside the box, week 2, back with the data goat, NFL data goat, Scott Barrett. Once again, excited to be here with Scott. We're going to break this down position by position, talk about the chalk. We're going to talk about some of our favorite contrarian plays. You know the drill. Same stuff as always. Excited to be here. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm feeling good, man. I'm feeling loosey-goosey. It was busy last week. I dropped ass, a revolutionary new stat in the world of football analytics. And then this week I wrote 18,000 words for my week 1 recap. And then I wrote, I don't know, probably about 10,000 words for the slate breakdown, but that was co-authored with Jake Tribby. And then trimmed out another 2,000 or to really narrow the pool. And so it was a busy week, but feel really good about my grasp on the slate as a whole. Excited to dig into some of these players we'll be talking about. And for the folks at home who maybe are new first-time listener, let me just give you the lay of the land here. I'm Scott Barrett, CEO of FantasyPoints and FantasyPoints Data. And my job is to just tell you my thoughts on various plays. Here's why I like this guy. Here's why I think people are overestimating him this week, whatever. I'm supposed to be the football analytics guy, but Neil is the game theory expert. Neil is the guy who freaking won $1 million playing DFS. He knows how to play DFS so much better than I know how to play DFS. And so what this show, why we decided to do this last year was sort of the sum of our parts being greater than the whole, where it's, I'll say, I really like Patrick Mahomes this week because blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, but he's 15% owned. He's the highest owned quarterback of the slate. Like all of his stacking partners are expensive and scared money don't make no money. So what do we do in a tournament is we fade the chalk. We go contrarian. We think outside the box. And so Neil is here to remind me of that, is to, I'll give you all these plays. It's going to seem like I'm probably talking up too many plays, especially this week. But at the end, we build lineups together and Neil kind of picks and chooses from the arguments I made and builds the best lineup possible. And that's more or less what this show is. Was that a good explanation? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect explanation. That was the idea of the show. You reached out to me like, hey, I'm really good at this NFL data stuff. You're really good at this DFS stuff. Let's combine our powers, see how it goes. I do like that from Krill Fingers. Yeah, exactly. It's just flannel enthusiasts meet ass connoisseur. That's exactly what the show is. That's the better description. You said all that stuff, and then Krill Fingers really just summarized it really well there.
Can we just put that up at the top of the screen?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Instead of outside the box.
Yeah, that'll be the new name of our stream going forward. I think that you nailed it. I also think, you probably sell yourself short in terms of your game theory expertise, because you also like the biggest part of, playing DFS is looking at a player and be like, oh, wow, he's coming in at that low ownership. Like, that's insane. He should be way higher owned than that. And you're very good at that. Like that is, kind of the name of the game with DFS. So I think you are selling yourself short a little bit from the DFS angle. And of course, Scott saw some success last year in the DFS, won a big $25,000 tournament. So hopefully we can bring back that success this year. We made some nice lineups last year in the Millie, got into the top 1% multiple times on our very limited number of lineups. So hoping to do that again this week. Last week it was looking good for a little while. We had a really hot start with one of our lineups where we had Rashid Shaheed, we had the CJ Stroud double stack, all worked out pretty well. Didn't quite cash, but it did not quite get to the 1% line. So this week, this is the week that we plan to win a Millie. Are you in for that, Scott?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's win $1 million, Neil, live on stream. That would be, I'm okay with that.
I think it'd be fun. Yeah. Also, I do have to congratulate Scott, who was the first ever winner of the Fantasy Points version of the DFS cage match. Beat Jake and I came in as the guests and beat us in the DFS cage match. It was humiliating for me. Jake, he didn't even come close. So I don't think he felt the humiliation, but do have to congratulate you for that big win. Jake and I did the show again this week with Chris Spags. I'm confident that I'm going to beat both of them this week. But how did you feel about your team?
Just easy victory, just kind of coasted, never in doubt. So shout out to the Brotherhood of Patterson. It's sort of like a Big Brother program in Patterson, New Jersey. So if you want to support them, you can tail my donation of $100.
All right. I think we've set it up nicely enough. So again, we're going to go position by position, talk about all of the plays. I like to always start by just talking about the chalky plays, just to kind of lay the land. This is what the field is going to do. And then we break into some of our favorite contrarian plays as well. So the chalkiest play on the slate, you already kind of alluded to this. Patrick Mahomes, 15% projected ownership on DraftKings. He's 7,000. How do you feel about that ownership for Mahomes this week?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, obviously, I think Mahomes is going to fuck this year. I think this is like, it's total outlier year last year. I think he's going to shred this Bengals single high coverage. Mahomes was like 30% better against single high last year, which is insane because he was throwing to Justin Watson, Mecole Hardman, MVS as his single high beaters. And now he has Xavier Worthy, the fastest kid alive. Like, hell yeah, let's fucking go. Except chalkiest quarterback of the slate, 15% owned. Counter argument you can make is he hasn't scored 21 fantasy points since October of last year. Then he only exceeded 18 or reached 18 in 2 of those games. And when you can make arguments like that, it's just kind of easy. It's also like I was saying on this stream, like I was really worried about Burrow's wrist injury. My Cincy sources were scaring the crap out of me. And if it looked rough in week 1, I'm going to need to see it before I believe he's healthy. And so like, that's a concern for GameScript, Pacheco with bell cow usage. And so, factor all that in. I think he's a pretty easy fade. If you're going to play him, I'd want to get unique with an Xavier Worthy stack. Again, he does have the best schematic matchup. And so I would make sure he's on there. He's only like 2% owned because he's like popping as a horrible value, but clearly the GPP upside's there. And so, that's my thoughts on Mahomes' easy fade for tournaments.
And then Jaden Daniels, the number 2 projected ownership here. Great week last week, his NFL debut. Didn't even like play that well. His quarterback rating was really low last week, like 40 something, very low, and yet still put up a huge game as far as fantasy goes. Another great matchup this week with the Giants. He's 6,200, 12% ownership seems pretty fair, but what do you think? We do have a lot of quarterbacks on this slate.
Yeah, this is my Exodia quarterback. This is the quarterback I told you to go all in on at cost in redraft leagues. Largely due to that rushing upside. Results were phenomenal. But again, 12% owned, second chalkiest quarterback of the slate. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. That doesn't seem very sustainable to me, nor, the amount of rushing attempts, which I think was like the 20th most all time. And Cliff Kingsbury was immediately like, yeah, we can't do that again. He took a pounding, especially at the red zone. The guy managed only 83 passing yards to non-running backs. Really disappointed in Cliff Kingsbury, who put Terry McLaurin in the DeAndre Hopkins role, or, just static. 90% of his routes lined up to left wide receiver. That's going to be an issue against Deonte Banks this week. And so, yeah, I think you can easily justify fading him at 12%. I mean, it is a good matchup, and, he does run and he's Exodia, but we try and think outside the box, but, maybe in a small field single entry, he's definitely one of the best values of the slate at the position. He's my cash quarterback.
Those are only quarterbacks on the slate that I think we could even argue are chalky because they're the only ones who are over 10%. So,
I also had Kyler in my write-up, and then I removed him when I saw him come in at 3. Lamar is an easy fade for me. Daniel Jones, what are we doing, folks? He is terrible. He's also coming off of an ACL injury. I know it's the nuts matchup, but that dude is so bad. And so, I think I just auto fade the top 5 right there.
Wow. All right. You are nuts because these are some of my favorite quarterbacks at the top.
Really?
I mean, Daniel Jones,
who are you going to argue for?
Well, okay. Daniel Jones at 7%. I don't like as much. I was thinking he was going to come in much lower than that. With the matchup against the Commanders, to me, it's like, do you just play quarterbacks against the Commanders? Do you want a quarterback against the Commanders who just give up all of the receiving yards to every wide receiver every week? Like, it just seems like the matchup is too good. You've got pretty condensed options in Wan'Dale Robinson and Malik Neighbors for Daniel Jones. He rushed for 7 700 yards 2 years ago. So I don't really care that he's a bad NFL quarterback. I think I might still be willing to take shots there. 7%, again, a little bit higher than I was kind of hoping for there. I was thinking he would be a pretty contrarian option. Maybe he's a fade at 7%, but if he ends up coming in lower ownership than that, I don't know. I think you got to at least take a shot. You think it's just too bad, just unplayable in general? Because I mean, if you can't play him against Commanders, you can't really play Daniel Jones ever, seems like.
Yeah, I don't think I want to. So post ACL, I don't see him having the same rushing upside. Since he signed his big contract, his nickname is Danny Dimes, by the way.
I'm aware.
Since he signed his contract, he has 2 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, more pick sixes more touchdowns to the opposite team than to his own team. He is so bad.
I know he's so bad. It's just,
I mean, it really, I get it. I could see it. It's the nuts matchup, easy stack with Neighbors. But Neighbors is super chalky. Dimes is the 5th highest owned quarterback the slate. So I just think there's better plays drawing much lesser ownership, which gives us more upside.
And I feel like you tend to not like the PPR scam wide receivers, so I think you'd be disinclined to play Wan'Dale Robinson.
I would honestly rather kill myself than win $1 million with Wan'Dale Robinson in my life. I'm a Giants fan, okay? And so, What are you doing with Malik Neighbors? You give Wan'Dale Robinson 12 targets, and then what does he do with it? He gets 44 receiving yards. He doesn't even hit double-digit fantasy points or 3x value. This guy is fucking worthless. I hate him so much.
That was not against Commanders, though. He is playing the Commanders
so much.
Yeah. So I was pretty spot on with how you feel about playing Wan'Dale Robinson. Okay. So I can see why you don't want to go there. I often like to lean into like bad offense meets bad defense, and that's exactly what we have.
I love a good slot fest.
Yeah. So it's just like I like leaning into the slot fest, but again, I prefer to do that when the field is not doing that. Like that's usually like you can find low owned plays in a slot fest. So again, this week again, Chargers Panthers is another one that's like, oh god, that's going to be ugly, could break our way. So another one that I have sort of interest in. But yeah, Daniel Jones coming in at 7%. I don't love that he is in the top 5 in terms of projected ownership. So I don't love him at this ownership, but if he comes in lower, I would have some interest. Kyler Murray, my favorite quarterback on the slate. You just say you're going to full fade Kyler Murray. I'm like, that is the game to me, is the Arizona Rams game. Just bad defenses, fun offenses. Stafford just never seems to put up fantasy points. Now I know we're always dealing with small sample sizes in NFL. So like I don't want to like fully say like, oh, you can't play Stafford because he never has big games. He could throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was slinging it last week, so he's playable. But still, I think Kyler is just like, he has the rushing upside. Going to be high scoring game, I would expect. So I'm surprised to hear. I think Kyler is the one of that group that I'm the most surprised to hear you just kind of write off. So why are you writing off Kyler?
I just don't think he buries you if you fade him. The Rams have historically owned him. He averages just 15.8 fantasy points per game against them. I think this offense is way more run heavy than it was ever getting credit for. Like zero Marvin Harrison Jr. best ball shares. And the large part behind that was, not really against him as a talent. It was just this Drew Petzig offense, which ranked bottom 3 in pass rate over expectation last year. They're just so much more run heavy, James Conner centric than they get credit for. I mean, if James Conner doesn't have multiple rushing touchdowns on the ground, or better yet, if those go to Kyler, I could definitely see that happening. I just like dramatically prefer Stafford, and he's so much easier to stack. Like we're getting questions in Discord, like, can you play 4 Rams players in cash lineups, and no one wants to play Stafford? So that's where I went. I did write up Kyler. Like I certainly get it. It's just contrasting him with Stafford. I'd rather go with Stafford.
And with Stafford, I mean, you're just like, if you look at his game log, Stafford just like has a long history of like, oh wow, his receivers absolutely crushed because they get through like via PPR. They just score so many points through the air, but like without scoring a ton of touchdowns. So then Stafford ends up like, oh wait, all of his receivers crushed and he had 18 fantasy points. And that seems to be like the story with Stafford throughout his career. Yeah. But yeah, I don't want to read too much into that. I do think we're always kind of dealing with small sample sizes, and it's like, just because he hasn't really done it that often doesn't mean he can't put up, again, 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. Like that would absolutely crush at his price tag. Seems within the realm of possibility. Obviously not the likeliest outcome. So I think I'm with you that I don't want to just disregard Stafford just because of what has happened in the past.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't really flashed a upside at all since his Super Bowl winning campaign. And now he's down Puka Nacua, and the offensive line is really banged up. But to me, it's like if Kyren Williams scores 0 rushing touchdowns, I think Stafford onslaughts like can easily break the slate. And like, even if he just comes in, and like, even if he doesn't break the slate, it's just like the receivers with him.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that was my winning 25K lineup where it's like Stafford.
It was Demarcus Robinson.
Yeah. And so there's that to it. Yeah. So if Kyren has 0 rushing touchdown, like he could put up a slate wrecking score. I just think Kyren probably scores like 3 touchdowns this week.
Yeah, that is obviously the biggest worry there, because you'd expect the Rams to put up points, but we just don't know. Will it be through the air? Will it be on the ground? And then Devon wanted to know, why is Lamar an easy fade for Scott? And I have the same question. We saw last week, J.K. Dobbins ran all over this Raiders defense, sort of hopeful that it's going to be a lot of running again for the Ravens. And Lamar Jackson, I mean, we just saw him 116 rushing yards last week. Seems like he might work better with Derrick Henry there. They might be able to kind of feed off each other, open up some lanes there. But you're not having it with $7,700 Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, let me just say, like, I'm going to be wrong a lot this week. Like, everyone's going to be wrong a lot. Like, week 1 was the field overestimating their ability to predict outcomes. Week 2 is analysts doing that. And I'm going to do that. But like, that's where my edge is. I wrote like 30,000 words this week. I did all it. And so I'm going to pick my spots. And and so like, this is where we get into debates, or like our biggest disagreements fundamentally come down to like most often game script. And so like Lamar Jackson, since the start of last season, averages 103 rushing yards per game in losses, under 50 rushing yards per game in wins. And so you saw that last week, but that was the AFC Championship preview. And so like in a non-competitive game against the Raiders, that's not really when I play Lamar, but against the Chiefs, that's a spot where I'm going to go all in.
No, I love that note that it is, this is a game where you'd expect them to play from ahead, won't really be needing Lamar to be running. So that is a good note, good little stat to throw in there with Lamar. And the price tag is so high that I am like, I look at it on paper and I'm like, that looks like a good spot for Lamar. But like, there are so many cheaper quarterbacks who, one of them will probably outscore him unless he goes completely off. You would expect somebody from the, Jaden Daniels, Anthony Richardson, just so many cheaper quarterbacks who are pretty likely to outscore him. So I'm not super into it, but I don't hate the idea. I think
Daniels scares me the most of the big 5
as far as fading goes.
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable with his $6,200 price tag. It's just like, he could put up a need to have it score pretty easily at 6,200 with his rushing upside. All right, so we've talked about kind of the chalkier options. Really not that bad a chalk on this slate, but would like to hear some of your favorite, more contrarian quarterback options.
I really like Dak Prescott a whole lot. Since their bye last season, Dallas leads the league in pass rate over expectation. Only Josh Allen averages more fantasy points per game over that span. And we saw that last week. Like this was just blowout victory game script, and Prescott threw the ball 32 times to 19 running back carries. This is probably like a bottom 10 matchup on paper, but like where fantasy points and fantasy points data like really differentiates ourselves is our access to like the coverage cell data and our analysis revolving around that. It's been like a cheat code for DFS, and it's a cheat code for props, and no other site really spends that much time. Well, like Hilo does a really good job, but for the most part, like not a lot of people are looking at this. And so this is a perfect schematic matchup. The Saints played man coverage at a top 5 clip last week and a top 5 clip last year. Dak Prescott doubles his efficiency against man coverage. CeeDee Lamb doubles his efficiency against man coverage. Both of them are Prescott's top 3, Lamb number 1 at the position against, or second best behind Tyreek against man. Brandon Cooks also much better against man. He gets a 70% boost. Marshawn Lattimore hasn't practiced all week. And so, it's just everything. Oh, and he also, I think averaged like 50% more fantasy points per game in home games last year. And so it's just like, you like start with the projection and then you apply like boosts, and it's like, okay, schematic boost. Okay, he's home, another boost. Okay, Marshawn Lattimore's another. And so just everything kind of trending in that direction. And so I know CeeDee Lamb's chalky, but Prescott is not. Brandon Cooks with Ferguson out is popping as one of our top values on both sites. That's one of the players we're much higher than everyone else on. And Alvin Kamara on the bring back, and that feels like an easy dub stack to me.
Do we know if Marshawn Lattimore is in or out yet?
I don't think so. I just know he hasn't practiced all week. I mean, it's not a huge thing. It just kind of docks Cooks.
Okay. Yeah. Just double checking that because I didn't see that he was ruled out, but good note. All right, Dak. Yeah, I like that idea quite a bit. Dak, we just know the Omega upside for that offense. They could just score quite a bit. And kind of low owned 6,700 for Dak. I think that just stacking Dak with CD, it gets so expensive. Not a lot of people will want to pay out for it. But we do have a lot of value on the slate. So I think it's totally viable and clearly has the ability to just completely break the slate. You talked about Stafford already. Any other lower owned quarterbacks that are important?
Well, yeah. If I'm fading the top 5, I better have some lower owned quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson for sure. And so like that's really what it comes down to with Jaden Daniels is like, why is he half as highly owned as Jaden Daniels? He led all quarterbacks in fantasy points per dropback last week, led in fantasy points per dropback last year on like a per 4 full quarters sample. This is the best quarterback in fantasy history, like 30% better than Lamar Jackson's best year, which broke every record. And so the concern I have, or maybe everyone has, is what happens against Malik Willis and the Packers. Malik Willis, from what we've seen from him, is like so much worse than Zach Wilson, like Zach Mettenberger, career 61.7 net passing yards per game and starts. So impossibly bad. And so you could read that as like, oh, that's not great. But like, I kind of think it is. I think that means, favorable starting field position constantly, which means, he has the potential to score multiple times on the ground. And like, even if this is a slow paced game, I look at what Richardson did last week. Indianapolis ran a league low 44 plays. He still dropped 27.1 fantasy points. And so, yeah, I could easily see a multiple touchdown game from him. I think he's an awesome play.
Yeah, I feel like Anthony Richardson at low ownership is always a good play. Like we've seen him complete. You could have just said that, yeah. Right. Four full games for Anthony Richardson. He averages 26.2 fantasy points per game in those games. I think it's 4, it might be 3. Either way, he's just, as you say, per quarter when he's out there, he just crushes. So if he can make it through the full game, which generally it's going to be more likely than not that he does make it through the full game. So yeah, that the matchup with the Packers is the one thing that has been holding me back. But yeah, that's a good point about the potentially better field positioning. Maybe not as like script dependent. Like some quarterbacks, like, oh, he's going to stop throwing in the second half. But like Anthony Richardson, well, he'll keep running even if they are quite up by quite a bit. So yeah, I think you're right that probably the game script is a thing that is holding back the ownership and probably shouldn't. I guess also the price tag. He is $600 more expensive than Jaden Daniels. But we've seen the upside with Anthony Richardson.
Another one in that like sort of middle range is Brock Purdy. He's just like always too cheap and always too low owned. He averaged 20.2 DraftKings fantasy points per game last year. That would rank third best on the slate. He's priced as the QB9. He ranked second best in fantasy points per dropback last year. It's just like a matter of him getting pushed. And so I could kind of see it happening. The Vikings have an underrated run defense. They were top 5 last year. And so if Jordan Mason gets stuffed on the ground, especially inside the red zone, could be a big Purdy week. So he works as leverage against Jordan Mason. You have the easy stack with Deebo Samuel, who everyone wants to play. It's the nuts schematic matchup for him and Deebo. Deebo best in the league against too high coverage. Purdy best or second best. I think best in against too high coverage last year. And so, that one's kind of easy. Baker Mayfield's fine. I like a different angle from that game. And actually we can just jump to that, which is Jared Goff. I think he might be my favorite GPP play of the week at the quarterback position. And so it's like, he's less highly owned than Baker Mayfield. It's highest over under of the slate by a landslide. Lions implied point total is 7.5 points higher. And this comes after the Jameson Williams breakout game. So betting's illegal in Texas. First bet I made when I touched down in New Jersey for my wedding was Jared Goff MVP bets. And like, that has to look better now. Like his expectation should be higher now following the Jameson Williams breakout, really having that competent pass catcher alongside the other 3 studs they have. And, it's a great matchup. It's a home game, which is so crucially important. Here's an interesting stat too. Against Todd Bowles, Goff has hit multiple touchdowns in 4 of 4 games, 350 passing yards in 3 of 4 games, and 500 passing yards in one of those games, averaging 383 passing yards per game against Todd Bowles. I only looked that up because I was a little worried about the blitz, but I don't think so. Really good matchup, home game. Oh, and they're insanely banged up. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their best defensive player, Antoine Winfield, is out. Kalijah Cansey, who had the second most pressures on the team last year, is out. Their starting outside cornerback is questionable. His backup is out, and the starting slot is also questionable.
I do want to get to this question from Mile High. So this is something that Trey suggested we might try to do at some point, is talk about the stacks together. I don't know, it was kind of messy. I did try to do it on a show yesterday, just going stacks first, and then it just kind of gets messy in terms of breaking down, positions later. It's like, okay, now I guess we'll do the one-offs after we talk about the stacks. So we'll continue to think about the formatting, but we will talk about the Lions pass catching options as we go. Unless do you want to just like, off the top of your head, who are some of your favorite Lions? And we'll get more in depth when we get to those positions.
Yeah, the TLDR is Amon-Ra St. Brown, but like, let me just say this wasn't easy. So like, projections are Chris Wecht is team Jameson Williams is the best value. Brett Whitefield, who's like the smartest film guy I know, is like, no. This is a Sam Laporta game. He had 22 targets, 11 each in 2 games against the Buccaneers last year. And now they're down Antoine Winfield. The greatest impact that's going to have is on the tight end. He's their best defensive player. Buccaneers were already gave up the second most fantasy points per game to tight ends last year. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, tremendous success against them last year. Against the blitz, he has like a 50% target per route run. And so like, really, this is Jahmyr Gibbs always in play. So this is like one of those things where I really envy the MME bros. Like I wish I had time to be an MME bro, because make this easy on me, please. But I will say I think St. Brown is the best option, but it's not easy.
The thing that I've been kind of struggling with so far this year is what to make of this Lions defense. Like I kind of think the Lions defense should be pretty good this year. They weren't that great against the Rams last week, but my expectation is that they're going to be a pretty good defense this year. So then I'm like, I want to do game stacks. I like to think of the Lions as being a bad defense again, like where historically they've been a defense you can target. Last year they were like good for half of the year, kind of worse in the second half of the year. How are you feeling about like game stacking with the Lions this year? Do you think they are going to be a defense that teams are going to be able to score on?
It's tough to say. Aiden Hutchinson looked like the second best defensive player in football. Although, Rams had all those offensive line concerns, and he still, like, the pressure rate wasn't that high, but he was getting the ball out quick. I don't know. It's tough for me to say, in all honesty. But I definitely do prefer the Lions side, Jared Goff over Baker Mayfield, in part because of, the much softer defense he'll be attacking. It is a good schematic matchup for Baker. Like it's not like Dak Prescott versus man levels, but it's pretty good.
Justin Fields, somebody that, somebody asked about Justin Fields earlier in chat, comes in around 5% ownership. I do think this is, a better matchup for Fields. Like he might be able to score here. I like that he's going to be low owned. Last week I had concerns that he was just going to get super chalky because you have a cheap Justin Fields, still pretty cheap. And we know with the kind of huge upside he has. Any interest in Fields against the Broncos?
Yeah, absolutely. I almost wrote him up as my DraftKings cash play over Jaden Daniels. You just don't really need the extra savings this week, but like that's how close it was for me. You just look at like since week 7 of 2022, only Allen, Hurts, and Mahomes average more fantasy points per game. It's a different offense now with Arthur Smith. It's very slow paced. It's insanely run heavy, but he had 9 design runs last week. That was the third most he's had in any game since the start of last season. And like we've seen quarterbacks rack up a ton of rushing fantasy points under Arthur Smith, Tannehill 4.3, Mariota 5.2 rushing fantasy points per game. And this is just such a bad defense. It's such a horrible defense. He threw for 335 passing yards and 4 touchdowns against the Broncos last year. And so, I love me some Fields. How are you thinking about stacking him? I feel like naked, or maybe Pat Freiermuth, just because Pickens draws the Patrick Surtain shadow, and we really don't have anyone else. We know that from the Arthur Smith offense last year. It was just tight end and wide receiver 1.
Yeah, so that is a good question, and let me pull up now our first game of data. So let's say the concern coming in was that Freiermuth was going to be kind of not a full-time player. 63.3% route participation last week for Freiermuth. I was planning on saying George Pickens. I'm only stacking him with George Pickens. But you make a good point about Patrick Surtain, one of the few cover cornerbacks that we probably do need to actually worry about. Looks like the concerns with Freiermuth not as concerning as maybe we thought they were going to be. During the offseason there were rumors that he was going to be like just a full-on part-time player, wasn't really getting a ton of run during preseason games. So I think this is actually pretty promising. The 63.3% route participation for a tight end is average. It's not bad. 4 targets, not bad. So yeah, I like the idea of Freiermuth here.
17% target share. I know that you just didn't throw the ball at all, but like if Pickens comes down from that 30% to 15%, what does that do to Freiermuth, who's like clearly above anyone else? I will just say, like, every single week there's a Surtain shadow. I'll say, like, hey, be nervous on this guy. I don't really know what to do with Pickens. Like, it might be the exception, just because Fields kind of locks onto his wide receiver 1. Pickens is also more of a deep ball contested catch guy where like shadows matter a little bit less. And it's also like he might have impressed me more last week than any wide receiver in football. He looked unbelievable. He had, including plays negated and overturned, he had 4 catches of 30+ yards. Tyreek Hill has never done that. So I don't know. You could play Pickens. Like, I'm not mad at that at all.
I've pulled up the ass, Scott, and we see.
Look at that. Pickens, he did that against AJ Terrell's shadow coverage. Like, Evans had a great matchup. Jameson had an amazing matchup. Pickens did that in a brutal matchup. And like, I mean, Surtain might be the best cornerback in football, but AJ Terrell is like top 20.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a tough question for me. And honestly, I haven't given a ton of thought to Fields this week. I think the more we're talking about, the more I'm like, it's probably a good idea. I wrote him up in my game by game breakdown as somebody you can play, but not somebody that I've been super excited to go after, because I'm like, I do like to stack. I always want to be stacking my quarterback, and I don't feel that great about any of the stacking options. But I think you're like George Pickens probably can get it done against Patrick Surtain. Not the worst idea at low ownership in a large field GPP. I think Pat Freiermuth is a fine idea. We did see him, get those 4 targets, decent target share last week for him. Probably just those 2 are the only options that I'm considering as stacking options. I don't think I'm going to like Van Jefferson despite the 70% route participation. So I think it'd be either Pickens or Freiermuth for me, without a ton of confidence, I'd say. All right, other quarterbacks here. Anybody else that is important to your builds?
No, the only other one I'll say is a player I wrote up and then deleted and then hesitated on, almost adding him back, but didn't. That's when the guy really hits. And that was Sam Darnold. It's tough against the 49ers. It's a bad matchup, but Kevin O'Connell's a god. Darnold looked amazing last week. PFF's highest graded quarterback. Garbage time is a hell of a drug. He's so easy to stack. But ultimately, I did leave him out of the slate breakdown. Okay.
And then I alluded to it earlier, my sort of interest in going after the sloppy Chargers-Panthers game. I'm not planning on going to Bryce, but Justin Herbert coming in at 1% ownership at 5,800, I don't think is the worst idea. Do you disagree? Should I just X him out of my player pool? It just feels like it's a soft enough defense that like even Justin Herbert not running could just throw for a lot against this Panthers defense.
I think we're projecting like Arthur Smith historically insane levels of run heavy tendencies from the Chargers. But I mean, hey, him plus McConkey is a very easy stack and both pretty good values, and no one's playing it.
Yeah, that's kind of the thought. It's just like really soft defense. Nobody's playing it. Justin Herbert is theoretically a good quarterback. They only put up like 10 points last week, something crazy low, but I'm still hopeful that this offense will put it together a little bit more going forward. And if they're ever going to, you'd think it would be against the Panthers. So I don't know. It's just kind of an off the wall play that nobody's really going to, that I think maybe need to at least think about. So you already talked about Joe Burrow with that risk just not going there against the Chiefs.
No, not me.
Okay. And we've got some very solid quarterback options on the slate. I think that we've talked about all of the quarterbacks that I really had any interest in talking about. Do you have anybody else that you wanted to throw out there?
I don't think so.
All right, then let's move on. Talk about some running backs. All right, so top projected ownership of the slate goes to Breece Hall and Jordan Mason. We do have some chalkier at the running back position. Kyron Williams at 21%, Ramondre Stevenson 15%. But let's start with the top two at 32% each. Breece Hall, Jordan Mason, Christian McCaffrey has been ruled out. How are you feeling about these two?
I think if you were like, my first 5 minutes of looking at running back salaries, it's like, oh my God, Breece Hall, Jordan Mason, Kyron Williams, every lineup, log out. And obviously like ownership reflects that to a large degree.
Yeah.
I talked about it with Breece Hall, where it's like, if you go up until Aaron Rodgers got pulled from the game, it was the fifth best usage of any running back in any week since week one of 2021, where it basically equates to like a 29 fantasy point per game expectation. If he's a perfectly average player, and he's not, he might be the most talented running back in football. So insane usage. Usage is different than volume, the way I define it. Insane usage, unbelievable talent, massively upgraded offense with Rodgers replacing Zach Wilson. But looking at 32%, I think I'm going to be underweight him and overweight Kyron Williams. Arizona, worst run defense in football last year, maybe the worst defense in football. Kyron Williams, usage almost nearly as good, volume probably significantly better, because he's such a ball hog inside the red zone. Easily led all players in XTD and XFP per game inside the red zone last year, whereas like Aaron Rodgers is historically one of the biggest touchdown hogs in football. Kyron averaged 33.3 fantasy points per game against the Cardinals last year. I think Christian McCaffrey put up like 50 plus against them. And so to me, at cost, at ownership, and factoring in Barry you upside, I would prioritize Kyron over Breece. But like obviously Breece is an amazing play. And then Jordan Mason, it's really all just ownership. Like when you see that 32%, you're left with, I could see him getting 90 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and 1 catch for 10 yards. And then, you could beat him with a different play or anything like that. So I don't know. Are you going to come in under or over these guys?
Yeah. So that is
Kyron for sure.
I think I'll be over Kyron for sure as well. My expectation is that I'll be under on Breece. I think just I'm nervous about that Titans defensive. The Titans defense in general, I think is going to take a big step forward this year. So I'm concerned about that. The 3.8 yards per carry last week. We know how good Breece Hall is, so that's not really relevant using one game sample size to point to. He was pretty inefficient last week. But yeah, I think, we also have the 1 game sample size of that, just like insane usage last week. It's a tough fade because we also know
it happened at the tail end of last year too. It was like historically insane usage that like we've only ever seen from Christian McCaffrey, Steven Jackson, Brian Westbrook, LaDainian Tomlinson. We've only ever seen it from them once. Like that's just like the target volume and the carries and all that. But I think you're right. I think it's a tough matchup. Aaron Rodgers looked rusty, and like, who is he historically? He's like a guy who, like you said, averages 3.8 yards per carry, like 50% of the time. And then the other 50% of the time, he breaks off 1 to 2, like 70-yard runs and buries you. And so like, there's more volatility to his profile than 32% ownership is suggesting. So
Yeah.
I kind of like that coming underweight on him.
Yeah, like it's an uncomfortable fade because he is 7,400, and you just look at his usage, his like blow up games. Like, man, that feels like a low price tag that he could absolutely smash. But then also he could like he's certainly, there is room for Breece Hall to fail at 7,400 also. So yeah, I think I'm probably going to come in underweight to Breece Hall. Jordan Mason is an interesting one. My guess would be that I come in overweight, but I was actually asked, somebody DM me, if I do 300 lineups, would I be insane to full fade Jordan Mason this week? And I told him no. I was like, well, I mean, depending on your bankroll, like what percentage of your bankroll is it? If it's 1% of your bankroll, sure, go nuts, fade Jordan Mason. That's totally fine. If it's 50% of your bankroll, no, I would not full fade Jordan Mason across 300 lineups. That's the kind of thing that I do sometimes, is just like full fade the chalk. Just like, all right, you can see paths to him fail. I mean, you laid out a stat line that's actually pretty good: 90 yards and 1 touchdown, 1 reception. It's like, yeah, that's serviceable. But like, who says he scored a touchdown? He doesn't need to score a touchdown. As Debro says, terrible matchup for Mason. Trent Williams is going to play, but like, I don't know. I feel like Trent Williams leaves pretty frequently, and the offensive line is so dependent on him. Like, as long as Trent Williams is in there, it's one of the best offensive lines in the league. As soon as Trent Williams leaves, which seems to happen pretty frequently, they kind of deteriorate. So I don't know. I see paths for failure. He's not that used in the passing game. So like, if he doesn't get to 100 yards and or doesn't score a touchdown, there are certainly ways for Jordan Mason to fail. I still think I probably come in close to the field. I don't know, maybe even a little bit more, but yeah, I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with Jordan Mason. Maybe as we talk through some of these other running backs on the slate, I'll have a better idea of what I'm doing, because I think I could be talked into some other running backs that could then lead to me, being a little bit underweight to the field on Jordan Mason. But as of right now, my guess probably going to be a little bit overweight Jordan Mason. And Kyron, like you said, I'm with you on Kyron. I'm going to be above weight to the field on Kyron, almost certainly. Well, I guess on the other side of that, I mean, I'm pretty sure you're going to say you like James Conner. I think you talked about him a little bit already. 6,400, 11% projected ownership. That's the other one. Like, I don't know. I'm grouping them together in my mind, James Conner and Kyron Williams, because I'm like, man, I really want to play those passing games. But then I'm also like, well, both of these teams could just crush on the ground, and the passing game could do very little. How do you feel about James Conner?
I think he's fine. I wrote him up for FanDuel. He'd be probably lower on my list for DraftKings. He's fine.
Okay, so you're not super into James Conner. He's the other one that I'm like, man, I could just see myself playing a lot more James Conner, and just there are ways to get away from Jordan Mason, but you're not as into it as I am. Not that involved in the passing game last week, I guess. Sort of a concern for DraftKings.
They're just like plays I like more. I mean, he's scored twice in 3 of his 4 career games against the Rams. But he's also like never hit 3x. I think he averages like 40 rushing yards per game in those games. I don't know. He's a really good value on FanDuel. There's just other players I like more on DraftKings.
I guess maybe let's just talk briefly about the other like chalky-ish players. Ramondre Stevenson, what's your level of interest there, since he is getting 15% ownership, pretty elite usage last week?
Is that right? Because that might just be the function of our projections. I think we're pretty high versus industry.
I think it is. No, I think he's actually projected pretty well around the industry. Yeah.
Well, then the argument against him is 4th lowest implied point total of the slate. 3.5 point underdogs. So game script probably isn't what it was last week. The New England's offensive line is terrible. It was a really good matchup last week. Probably less good this week, but like, if you want to say just based on the usage, he should be at least 1K more expensive. It's hard to argue against that, but if he's going to be that highly owned, I'm just going to pick different spots.
Yeah, I had to bring this up here because we just looked at last week. This is kind of insane usage. 25 of the team's 32 carries from running backs, 39 total carries last week for New England, and Ramondre Stevenson got 25 of them. And then he was also running routes on 72.4% of dropbacks, had 3 targets. So it's
that XFP percentage was the highest of any player on the week. Like it was just like the Patriots were doing nothing else but getting Stevenson the ball.
Yeah. I should mention, I haven't brought it up yet. You can see at the bottom of the screen, you can use promo code OTB20 to get 20% off. Is it 20% off anything at Fantasy Points? So that includes the data suite. So I'm the things I'm showing on the screen. This is the data suite that we're looking at right now. When you see a white background, that's just the projections page or the projected ownership page. All of this, whatever package you want to get, you can get it for 20% off using promo code OTB20 or the little box in the bottom left of your screen if you want to use that. Another easy way to get access to that 20% off at Fantasy Points. I find it to be absolutely awesome. I've told people, I've had a couple people ask me this week which package I think would be right for them, and I told them like I'm obsessed with the data suite. I think like anybody who has the time wants to like dig into the data. Yeah, the data suite is awesome. Otherwise, the NFL premium package, if you just want to be like get the content of a lot of really sharp people who are digging into the data for you, giving you the best data, I think like, and you don't have the time yourself to dig into the data, I also think the NFL premium package is fantastic because there are so many great analysts at Fantasy Points breaking down that data for you. So it kind of depends on how much time you have, how much willingness you have to dig into the data. If you are willing, I would just do the all-in package if you want to get into it. Otherwise, I think NFL premium for content. Anything to add there, Scott?
Yeah, well, what's crazy about this coupon code is 20% off all in is cheaper than premium plus data combined. And then you get the opto for free. You get college football for free. By the way, like I don't know anything about college football, but like it is just a print fest where you just tail, the projections for prize picks or prop betting, or you just set the opto for DraftKings and you just make money every single week. It's awesome.
Yeah, very, very good stuff.
And then if you have premium or all in, you get access to Neil's showdown articles, which are typically paywalled, my slate breakdown, my show with Johnny. You can hang out in Discord with us. So yeah, highly recommend.
Yeah, definitely recommend signing up if you have not already done so. All right. Back to just so we talked a little bit about Ramondre. Just the projection is good just because the usage is so good for Ramondre, even in a Patriots offense that does not look very good right now. Should be able to get there at 6,200. I think Ramondre to me is a better, almost a better cash game play than a GPP play, because it's hard to envision him scoring 3 touchdowns because the Patriots are just not going to score 3 touchdowns, but like just six receptions and unlimited carries, like maybe just has a pretty significant floor as long as he doesn't get hurt, I guess. So I like Ramondre more, I think, from a cash standpoint than GPP, but obviously still fine in GPPs. Jahmyr Gibbs, the other one. I mean, we talked about him as a potential stacking partner with Jared Goff. I know you're playing the game through Jared Goff. Do you think Jahmyr Gibbs will be a big part of your plans as well? We saw last week it was, I didn't know what to make of what happened last week with the Lions. I'm going to pull up the bell cow report again, because it felt to me like there was a long period during the second half where it was like, oh my God, they're doing it. They're giving Jahmyr Gibbs. He's going to be the bell cow now. David Montgomery is just sidelined. They're not using him at all. And then like right at the end, they bring in David Montgomery to get the final touchdown. He like played the whole final drive. So it was like, okay, I guess he's not in the doghouse, and you end up with kind of a similar split to what we saw last year with these guys. What's your read on the Lions backfield?
Here's where I think Jahmyr Gibbs is underrated. It's if you like exclude plays that are exactly at the 1 yard line, since Montgomery returned from his injury, however long ago that was, Gibbs outsnaps him inside the 10 yard line, like 7-3 or 8-2 even. It's something extreme like that. So like he has more touchdown upside than he gets credit for. The dude is really good at football. He's great in the passing game. It's one of the most potent offenses. He's definitely too cheap this week. Just like personally, kind of how I'm constructing is like, I'm mostly like forgetting about him until like I look at a lineup and I see I don't have enough Detroit and Tampa, and I have salary that can tweak things a little bit, get him in there. That's kind of how I'm viewing him.
Is this almost like at least one lion in every lineup kind of a slate for you?
No, I think it's more so I'm just going to have a ton of Jared Goff.
Okay. All right. Let me open it up to you just generally, and any other running backs that you really like in general.
Yeah, I'll say I kind of expected Pacheco to be where Stevenson was and Stevenson to be where Pacheco was. Again, like really great usage last week, much better than what he had last year. 80% snap share, That was even higher inside the red zone. 15 of 17 carries, 3 of 5 targets, second best route share of his career. It's an absolutely amazing matchup. Since he had one of the worst run defenses of football last year, we just saw what Ramondre Stevenson did to them last week. It's ideal game script. He's about 20% more productive in wins than losses. And he's leverage off of the chalkiest quarterback of the slate. So yeah, I think he's a really good GPP play.
Any
and a great
concerns about
value.
any concerns about Samaje Perine coming in and having a bigger role?
Yeah, for sure. That's like a very warranted concern. But I mean, I don't know. Still, it's like amazing usage. He can get there even if Samaje sees more work, but it's positive game script. So I wouldn't expect too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Pacheco, 11% projected ownership. Yeah, looks like a pretty good spot for Pacheco. They could be running all over them. J.K. Dobbins, I guess the only other one above 10% that we didn't talk about, just crushed last week. I mean, you look at his stats versus Gus Edwards. It was comical how much more efficient J.K. Dobbins was than Gus Edwards this week. Now they get another great matchup with the Panthers. 5,400 J.K. Dobbins. Is that a great play, or is that just you don't want to play J.K. Dobbins when he's over 10% owned?
So I think the Chargers are going to run the ball 90% of this time in this game and win by double digits. And it's like the nuts matchup. Panthers were the worst run defense in football last year. At least they gave it the most rushing fantasy points to running backs. And they only had 2 good defensive players. And that was Brian Burns, no longer on the team, and Derek Brown, who's on IR. I mean, Dobbins looked amazing. He looked all the way back. He outsnapped Gus Edwards 32-22, 4-0 inside the 10-yard line. His yards per carry was like 6 times better, 7 times better, 13.5 to 2.4. And so like, if there was ever a matchup for him to go nuclear, it feels like it would be this. Here are my reservations. A nitpicky one is that he didn't really look all that great to me. Like, he looked kind of slow. I know what his miles per hour was, but like, I want to see his MPH on all other runs because it looks slow. And or at least he gassed out towards the end of it. It was also like missed assignments on the big runs. But really it's just like, does he have bury you upside? I think the split with Edwards is still going to be closer than people think. I don't think he really has 20 touch upside, at least yet, but still it's just like if him and Gus Edwards combine for 60 carries, like, yeah, that's what Harbaugh wants to do. And that's what the matchup dictates.
Yeah. So what's your final verdict on, what is it? 11%. Oh, I clicked in the wrong spot here. 11% projected ownership for Dobbins at 5,400. Do you think, is that somebody you would have if you play 10 lineups? Do you think you'd have a share of JK? You could have more than one share of JK Dobbins.
I don't know yet. I really don't know yet. You can help me out with that when we talk later tonight. But it feels, if 11% feels right, it might even feel too low. I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I'm like, that feels like a pretty good number to me, just because of the defense. Like, I wouldn't love it if they were playing Baltimore, but because of the defense going against the Panthers, I'm like, yeah, it seems like a good spot for J.K. Dobbins. So I don't hate that. Zach Charbonnet is one that I feel like we need to talk about, because you look at projections around the industry, the difference in projection is like 5 points. Some places he's like one of the top projections on the entire slate. Other places he's, kind of a good projection, projecting for about 15 fantasy points, but not like, oh my God, you need to jam in Zach Charbonnet. Ultimately, I haven't seen that many places have him with super high ownership. So at 7% ownership, I don't know. It's a tough matchup with the Patriots, but he's 5,800, should be the workhorse here. Honestly feels similar to me to Ramondre Stevenson. Like they both feel like, oh man, the workload should definitely be there. I don't know what to do with Zach Charbonnet. Tell me your thoughts on Charbonnet.
Yeah, I think our projections had him as like the 10th best running back value of the slate. And I kind of didn't give it a second thought, because like, I'm not really a Charbonnet guy. I'm actually a Charbonnet hater. My prospect model didn't like him. I was all in on Kenneth Walker for redraft leagues, RIP. And so that's kind of, Jerome Ford's another one too, where it's like, he ranked 3rd in XFP last week. He's a really good value, projected touch per dollar value. They're all fine. They're just not they're good plays. I could end up with them. They're just not my conviction plays versus the field.
Yeah, he was just one that I needed to talk about, because as I was like going over cash game plays earlier, I was like, you look at some places like, oh yeah, Zach Charbonnet, an obvious cash game play, but then most places like, yeah, he's a decent point per dollar play, not like an absolute smash. Dave asked, what is the projected ownership for Gus? Projected for 1% ownership, Gus. I guess it's worth talking about that, since you do think it's going to be a pretty even split still. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. Edwards is 5,200. He has the same great matchup with the Panthers. If he's ever going to look not dusty, it would be this matchup with the Panthers. Any interest in Gus Edwards at 1%?
I don't think so. It could be. I don't know.
That's the type of play I could see myself if I were at 150 maxing, 2 or 3%, like maybe 3% Gus Edwards, just like get slightly above weight to the field, feel good if he absolutely crushes. But I think the floor is pretty low. The ceiling it's there, but it's not like enormous, I think, for Gus Edwards, because he's not that involved. I wouldn't expect him to be that involved in the passing game. So it's like the ceiling could be if he gets 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, like that is how he breaks it, which is not going to happen all that often. So I think to me, it would be like slightly above weight to the field, large, like if I'm MMEing, but probably not going to make it in to my first 20 lineups, I guess is kind of how I feel about Gus Edwards. All right. Any other running backs that are important to you this week?
Yeah, a lot of them.
I figured.
Maybe my favorite GPP play at the position is Derrick Henry. And so for redraft, I'm like known as the bell cow guy. I did the bell cow report for years. And so bell cows are great. Like I define it as like a running back who gets a lot of snaps, carries, and targets. And then like a workhorse back is a guy who just gets a lot of carries and not a lot of targets. And so like the best thing you could be is a bell cow. Like Breece Hall is a bell cow. Kyron Williams is a bell cow. The next best thing, or like honestly, basically even to that, in Derrick Henry's case, is a game script sensitive workhorse with amazing game script, ideally in a good matchup as well. And so Derrick Henry and the Ravens are 8.5 point favorites against the Raiders. Since 2019, he averages 10.2 more fantasy points per game in wins than losses, 22.5 versus 12.3. That's basically the difference between, everyone but Christian McCaffrey, or like the RB2 versus the RB25. This is the most game script sensitive player in fantasy football history. And he's made me so much money in DFS because for whatever reason, people keep forgetting he's the most game script sensitive. There's like Al Zeidenfield has this thing called the flow chart, right? And so the flow chart with him is like Derrick Henry in a game that the team is favored by 6+ points, you play it. And especially when he's below 10% owned. And so I like him a lot, but I have like 4 more mini Derrick Henrys on this slate.
You want to tell me about him?
Sure. So Jonathan Taylor is another one where it's kind of the same exact thing. He in victories last year averaged, I don't know, I lost it, but a lot of fantasy points per game despite splitting work with Zach Moss. And his usage was amazing. He didn't get any targets, but he ranked top 3 in the week in route share, first in snap share, had 100% of the opportunities from the backfield. It's a good matchup. So like Green Bay was a top 5 run funnel last season. And in losses gave up the 3rd most rushing yards per game. And really it just comes down to Malik Willis. Like I don't bet spreads, and there's a reason I don't. It's because probably would have lost a lot of those. But to me, it seems like the Colts should be like 10-point favorites. And so I envision plenty of red zone drives starting in enemy territory, easy stack with the defense. You could also stack Henry with Baltimore defense, by the way. And so again, he's like a mini Derrick Henry. I prefer Derrick Henry, but the case is there for him as well for similar reasons.
Any concerns about, I don't know what to make. Is this a good sign or a bad sign? Jonathan Taylor last week, I mean, obviously good. He took all of the team's running back carries, 16 out of 16 running back carries, 22 total carries for the team. He also had 70.8% route participation. Very, very good for a running back. Saw 0 targets though, which is kind of what you think is going to happen with a rushing quarterback like Anthony Richardson. Probably not going to target his running back all that much. I guess I think the route participation is at least promising. Theoretically, he could pick up in the targets department, but like I sort of feel like for Jonathan Taylor to hit at this price tag, he's going to need multiple touchdowns and or at least 100 yards in a touchdown. So it is like it's a big ask that he certainly can hit. So I think I kind of like to play too, but like certainly there is a lot of like opportunity for him to miss. Do you think he gets more involved in the passing game going forward?
Yeah, the route share implies, yes, there's a positive regression, and there certainly is. I just wouldn't bet too much on it with Anthony Richardson, a mobile quarterback. Mobile quarterbacks don't typically target running backs. And then even with Minshew last year, he wasn't getting a lot of target volume despite, a route share not this high, but still fairly high. Ultimately, it just doesn't matter to me. Like you're betting on with these game script sensitive workhorse running backs, you're betting on the Joe Mixon game. And so maybe it's not the highest probability outcome, but like it's what you stand to win if you're right. And in this case, it's a lot. And like the odds are pretty good of him having the game Joe Mixon had last week, where it was like, 28 plus carries, 160 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. The odds are better than 6%. And so it's Derrick Henry, it's Jonathan Taylor. Another one of these guys I have two more I feel really good about. Brian Robinson. Again, I don't bet spreads, but to me, it felt like it should be, Commanders 3.5 point favorites. I think they're just 1.5. And so pull up Brian Robinson. Look at the usage last week in perfectly unideal game script. Everything about the game script screamed, this is an Austin Eckler week. And yet lo and behold, 12 carries to 2, 4 targets to 4. And so now game script, if I'm right, is perfect for Brian Robinson to be a bell cow with this good game script. You don't see too much of Austin Eckler against a bad defense. You see a lot of, ideally red zone drives. I also think Brian Robinson's really good. Ultimate and like Giants last week gave up 6.7 yards per carry to Aaron Jones. Ultimately, I might just be a little too excited because like the Commanders are going to be favored only once over their next, 8 weeks. And like I said, the spread is tight. But if Washington wins this game, there's a really good bet. Brian Robinson beats value at low ownership by a good margin.
Yeah, I like that call. Definitely somebody that I drafted him in some battle royales. Seems like a good spot for Brian Robinson at low ownership. What do we have him at 5% projected ownership? Let me guess. I want to guess your final Derrick Henry. My guess would be Najee Harris.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Damn, he's only 2% too. He might or 3%. Yeah. So I don't get that at all. Arthur Smith is like he's World War II era levels of run heavy. Jaylen Warren barely touched the ball last week. Mike Tomlin already said, he's still not 100%. This is the nuts matchup. This is the best matchup for running backs you could get. They looked just as bad last week. Our film charters were like, oh my God, it's not just that they have poor talent to defend the run, but it's also the scheme, which just invites gap runs up the middle all day. Najee, by the way, is also a better schematic fit for the Arthur Smith offense than he was for the offense last year. Just like add everything up, like nuts matchup. He's Arthur Smith's run heavy tendencies in this matchup. The Steelers should easily win. He could get 30 carries. And so you stack B-Rob up with Commanders D if you play him. You stack Taylor up with Colts D if you play him. You stack 100% Najee Harris and Steelers D. TJ Watt could kind of put up a Najee Harris stat line on his own. So I like all those game script sensitive running backs. I'm probably only going to bat about like 25% on those, but the one who hits could be the one who makes the difference this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And most of them coming in pretty low ownership. I do think we got the question from KT, Najee, or Fields. We like both of them. I think we sounds like we're both into both of them. Would you ever play them together in DFS?
No, I don't think I would. It's you're betting on one of those guys to get 2 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, probably not going to get the PPR scam Najee that we had a few years ago with Ben Roethlisberger, where he was like, oh my God, he just gets targeted constantly. We haven't really seen that from Najee recently. So maybe not the best pairing. I was contemplating it, but yeah, only 2 targets last week. You don't expect much from Justin Fields in the passing department. So I think I'm probably with you. That would not be a way to go. All right. So we went through all of the mini-me's of Derrick Henry. Any other running backs that you want to talk about here?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, then let me see if I can come up. We already talked about Zach Charbonnet. I mean, we
Alvin
about
Kamara, but really to me, he's just a good bring back for the stacks I like, the DAX stacks.
Yeah. Which are, it gets expensive quickly if you want to do a DAX stack with Kamara as a bring back, since he is 7,000. It's all expensive, but you can. I mean, there's nice value on this slate, so I think you can do it. We talked about Jahmyr Gibbs a bit. David Montgomery, 6,000, 6% ownership. Again, just like he was still pretty involved last week. I don't know, seems playable to me. Somebody in chat pointed out, and I think it could be right, that like maybe they brought him back in because everybody else was so tired. Like it was in overtime when they started using David Montgomery again. Maybe it was just a matter of Jahmyr Gibbs was gassed and it was like, all right, I guess we'll use our other running back again. So I do still have some concerns that he might be falling out of favor a little bit, but I guess promising that he did come back in. I don't know. I'm indifferent to David Montgomery at 6% ownership. Do you feel any different?
I thought about it. We just haven't really seen a ceiling game from him in a really long time. He had that week 4 against the Packers last year. He had 121 yards and 3 touchdowns. But since that game, he's basically been like 1 touchdown, 75 rushing yards every single game. I could see it hitting. It would suck for me. It would really suck for me. That's why I've thought about it. But probably not playing him.
Rachaad White, a bring back in your Detroit stacks, would he be interesting to you?
I'm probably not going there. Projections like him though.
Yep. Similar bet with Jerome Ford, just so has had pretty solid usage last week for Jerome Ford. I think that's the reason he's looking pretty good in projections around the industry, like point per dollar. 12 of the team's 14 backfield carries, and then also 7 targets on 63.6% route participation. I think that's going to be an outlier. I don't think we can count on, anything close to that many targets going forward. But I mean, that's pretty solid route participation. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will be the Jerome Ford show. How are you feeling about Jerome Ford this week?
Yeah, I mentioned so like that XFP, he ranked 3rd among all running backs in XFP last week. About the target volume, no David Njoku this week. But ultimately, I think like 4 of those came in like the 2-minute drill, garbage time, hurry up. So I'm kind of with you, but just like the role versus the price, I get it. I wrote him up. I just don't know. He's not a priority for me, but he might find his way into some lineups.
Yep, I think that's a similar take for me. Josh Jacobs, I mean, without Jordan Love, it's like the team probably won't be able to move the ball as easily. The Colts, I think, is an exploitable defense. I don't know exactly what to make of the Colts, but it could be just like that Josh Jacobs getting fed the ball this week with no Jordan Love there. You would hope they should, but they also might be able to just load the box against him with Malik Willis. I don't know. I can't decide what I want to do with $6,500 Josh Jacobs. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, that's what I'd be betting on, but definitely could see an outcome where he gets a ton of carries and a ton of target volume. But yeah, I would be betting against it. I just Malik Willis to me is so bad. I know the play caller is a genius, and the supporting cast is nice, but I don't think so. He only just joined the team like, I don't know, 18 days ago too. So
Malik Willis, yeah. Trying to decide if there's anybody else that we need to talk about. We talked about Gus. Either of the Dallas running backs, I was sort of torn about them because we do have Rico Dowdle 4,800, Zeke at 5,700. They split the carries pretty evenly last week. They are favored by quite a bit, so it feels like it could be a game script where they just end up wanting to run a little bit more. Is it just too split to even consider one? How do you feel about the Dallas backfield?
if you filter by inside the red zone, it tells you who to play. And that's just Z because he gets the near end zone work. I'm not playing that, but I get it given like how highly owned Lamb is. The one guy I did write up who I don't think we talked about was Aaron Jones. That's just but he was like the last name on my list. It was just I just love Aaron Jones. I think he's really good at football. It's a bad matchup, but I don't know. I could see him racking up PPRs and having a long run, and we always underrate his upside, even if he's just like a 60% snap share guy.
Yeah, he's a guy that you were very into all of best ball summer, and I think it looked pretty good. Like the usage looked really good last week for Aaron Jones, very promising. So I like that. Okay, any other? I think we've talked about all of the like important to talk about running backs. I think Tony Pollard I would have interest in, except for he's playing the Jets, so that kind of limits my my interest there. I guess Devin Singletary to me against the Commanders, 5,700, sort of interesting with a lot of people wanting to play the passing game. Going a little bit underlooked. He had a pretty good usage last week. Oops.
Yeah, dude, I don't want to play the Giants.
Okay, you're just out on the Giants in general.
Yeah. I will say Jaleel, our boy Jaleel.
Yeah.
Devon Veely is out. He kind of looked like a poor man's Marcus Colston. And then Cortland Sutton is drawing JPJ's shadow coverage. And we know my guy Marvin Mims, Sean Payton never wants to get him the ball. Yeah. So like maybe Jaleel gets like 10 PPRs with negative receiving yards. Like he's only 4,500 negative game script. So
yeah, he's sort of interesting. I thought about bringing it's just the matchup with Pittsburgh. It's like, man, what is the upside there? Just
that's what I'm saying. 10 PPRs, negative receiving yards.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. I think we've talked about most of the running backs on the slate. So I think we can move on, talk about some wide receivers.
Yeah. We talked about doing a quick little Q&A as like,
that's a good point. Yeah. This
also, by the way, the over under on when I first hit my jewel is the over hit at 111.
Well done. Look at you. Look at that restraint.
I'm going to get a Pepsi though, if you don't mind.
Yeah, you get a Pepsi. So I'll introduce this. So we talked about doing this last week and didn't tell you that we were going to talk about doing this. But if anybody has any questions about anything, we will just take a moment now. You can ask us about season long. You can ask us about DFS. You can ask us about what we're having for dinner tonight. Whatever you want to ask us, we'll take a 5-10 minute break, answer any questions that anybody has for us. Because little stretch break, little stretch easy. Ask us any questions you have. Scott now has his Mountain Dew. So if anybody has any questions that you want answered, happy to answer them.
We should have brought this up earlier. We should have given time to.
I know. I honestly completely forgot that we were planning on doing this until you said it. Yeah, this would have been a good thing to say earlier. Like, hey, we're gonna have a break point. We should have like maybe a graphic on the screen. Maybe work that out to be like, hey, we're taking the break here. Well, going forward, we'll be smoother with it. But I completely forgot this week. What is your biggest fear? Mine is the open ocean. That is a good question, Jake. I am super claustrophobic. Like that is, my biggest phobia, I would say, is claustrophobia. So I think my biggest fear is, you remember that submarine that was missing? Like, and it turned out that they probably just got crushed before they even knew that it was happening. But like being in a submarine, period, just like, no, hell no, I'm never going in a submarine. But that scenario where it's like, okay, I'm in a submarine and also we are in the middle of the ocean, nobody can find us, we're going to die in the submarine. That is my biggest fear. I would just hate that so much. Also not big on water, which is kind of funny for a guy who lives in Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes. I'm, not super comfortable in water. So there is that as well. Najee, that's a good question. That's a good question for you in particular, Scott, I think.
Oh, that's really interesting. I got to think about that. He has asthma? Is that what it is?
Is that right? Does Najee have asthma? Okay. I thought it was just like running backs going to different altitudes. But yeah, I think that might be right. That sounds sort of familiar now that you mention it.
I don't know. Can you clarify? That's interesting.
Yeah. What's your concern with Najee this week
In the high
at altitude? Yeah. It's good question, but yeah, please clarify.
I know. If you have like Crohn's disease, high altitude causes issues. Oh, it's just a general running back. Okay, I thought he had like some sort of ailment. No,
gotcha.
Not worried about that.
Okay. Crow Fingers asks, may have been brought up during wide receiver, may be brought up during wide receiver, but you mentioned Anthony Richardson at quarterback. Who would you pair him with, if anybody? Do you have any favorites?
Yeah, my guy would be Adonai Mitchell, and this is a good segue. So who was the ass king of week 1? That was rookie Adonai Mitchell. He was a player a lot of analytics bros did not like. I think that was fair because I was one of them. There was a lot of weird things in his profile. He was like the bottom left of every chart ever made this offseason. Well, he was top right in ass, which is the GOAT stat. And so very small number of routes. So like we don't have a ton of confidence in that we shouldn't, just because you can, get schemed open or all that. But our film experts did a film breakdown. They think he's just a baller. And like, that's what all the draft pundits said heading in, where it's like, he's really inconsistent, but like when he goes full speed, full throttle, he might be the best wide receiver in the class. He looked awesome. I know your boy, Alec Pierce, had the big game, but it wouldn't shock me if they mix in more deep stuff to Adonai Mitchell. It came very close to a big game. So yeah, I
gotta say, I don't love Alec Pierce being my boy. According to, I think I liked him once last week, and ever since then, Scott's been like, your boy had a big game. Or
so he was the most. He's going to get 100 yards and score 2 touchdowns with no one on him play of all time.
Yeah,
and it finally happened. What are the odds it happens again? I don't know.
Yeah. I to be honest was not I hadn't thought about Alec Pierce last week. Squirrel Patrol brought him up as a play that he liked. There, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I wouldn't call him my boy when I didn't mention him once last week. Had zero plans of playing him for most of the week. But yeah, he was awesome. 49ers onslaught. Neil Jaworski, yes, 49ers onslaught in play on DraftKings for a small field. For small field.
I think so. How many times did that hit last year?
Yeah,
so many times.
Everybody gets a bump without McCaffrey there.
More concentrated. I worry a little bit about Kittle against the blitz happy Vikings. I worry he's just gonna block a bit more because like that's who he is. He's an amazing receiver. He's also like the best blocking tight end. Ayuk. Maybe you worry a little bit about the holdout. He's a little rusty and
look bad.
Playbook's a bit different, but he's just a good player. So I could see him being a unique double. Yeah.
And I mean,
if it's really small, you could just play Purdy, Mason, Debo, get all the touchdowns.
Yeah, true. Ayuk 75.8% route participation last week, more than I thought he was going to get last week, frankly, in terms of route participation. Maybe not. I guess that's right around. He was slightly limited. That's kind of what we expected. Thoughts on the Spanish Armada? I'm going to say no opinion. I'm not much of a history of. I'm actually getting more and more into it as an adult, but couldn't tell you one thing about the Spanish Armada. Scott, do you have any opinions there?
I know not. I actually know a little bit about history. I know nothing about the Spanish Armada.
Munitz Jello, how do you feel about full frontal nudity? Big fan. Scott, how about you?
I think it depends on who's full frontally nude.
Yeah, for me, I just loved the movie Full Monty. Just a lot of dudes just like letting it hang out. That was I have not seen that movie. I've actually heard that it's good.
Yeah.
But JJ or Amon-Ra St. Brown, I assume you're talking for DFS this week.
All right. These questions stink. Let's get back to business.
All right, we're gonna get back to business. Appreciate you guys taking this time, giving us a little bit of a break, asking some good questions. Even if Scott thinks they stink, I think they were great questions, and appreciate you putting in the time for us. All right, we'll continue on. Talk about some wide receivers now. So let me pull up. I've got it pulled up now. Wide receiver projected ownership. Cooper Kupp, top of the board, 7,600 on DraftKings. 27% projected ownership for Cooper Kupp after we saw 21 targets last week. Now he gets great matchup with the Cardinals. Could be a high scoring game. How are you feeling about this for Cooper Kupp?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, if he was 8,600, we'd be having the same conversation. And he's 7,600.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just had 21 targets. That was the most of any player since 2015. This was a player I was super high on. I had him ranked 12th overall in my rankings, way ahead of Puka Nacua, and I was really scared about it. But it was like, no, I could just see Kupp looking like he's immediately back to 2021. He looks like that. The Puka injury obviously helps. Tyler Johnson, I'm not really too worried about him. I drafted him as a 4th round rookie pick in Dynasty years ago, and dropped him a long time ago. So, it's just absolutely the thing that's weird here, and maybe Darren can answer if he's in chat, is I expected Debo to be basically tied with him. That's
Interesting.
weird.
No, this is I think in line with general consensus around the industry. I don't think Debo is getting quite the ownership that Kupp is getting. But yeah, I mean, it seems good spot for Debo. No Christian McCaffrey. We saw him actually get some of that rushing work last week. He had like 8 carries for Debo last week. Pretty elite stuff there. Obviously, still going to be extremely used in the passing game. So yeah, the usage should be incredible for Debo this week. What do you think about 16% there?
Yeah, so it's. I just thought this was like super obvious. Oh yeah, Kupp 27%, Debo 25%. Everyone already that. So that's like pretty shockingly low. So like you said, he's reprising the wide back role without Christian McCaffrey. He had 8 carries last week, also a touchdown from a carry inside the 5-yard line, plus 9 targets. And so maybe this is like a scheme thing where, again, we spent a lot of work talking about coverage shell matchups. And so Minnesota, top 6 in rate of too high coverage last season, most too high coverage of any team in week 1. What do we know about too high coverage? Debo Samuel, best among all wide receivers, tied with Tyreek Hill in fantasy points per route run against too high coverage. Like that's how this team works. Like that's why Debo gets the fat contract, and why this offense is as potent as it is because you have Brandon Ayuk, an elite single high man beater. You have Debo, the best player in football against too high coverage, and there's no way to stop the 49ers offense. And what do we have? We have very high rate of too high, should be a Debo week. Added bonus is the wide back role. So to me, it's like Kupp should be 33% owned. Debo should be 30% owned. And so I don't know if maybe the lean then is just all in Debo. I think that's a great chalk to me.
Yeah. So, okay. We've talked about Kupp and Debo. I think we're both like on the same page. Both look really good at these ownerships. So I think they're both like, yeah, I'll probably be above weight to the field there. They just have such great roles. Should have big games.
What's the angle to fading Debo? Like, I'm not even really seeing that. But what's the angle to fading Kupp is Demarcus Robinson. Oh, well, he's highly owned. Tyler Johnson, Kyron Williams. And so it's not, you can get around. I feel like you can get around Cooper easier. Like I said, I'm going to be way overweight the field on Kyron. So maybe you could also play Kyron and Kupp though too. Shit.
Pretty easily. Like, that's the thing. They're cheap enough. So like, and we'll get to the like tertiary receiving options for the Rams, who I'm actually really into this week. But like, I wouldn't be that shocked if we just see Kupp and Kyron have huge games, and the tertiary receiving options are just like, yep, they're fine. Had a couple receptions, didn't really do much for the price tag. Like he hurt you a little bit. I don't know. Like it wouldn't be that shocking to just see Kupp and Kyron just dominate the workload again. So I do think it is viable to play them together this week.
Does Kyron even work as leverage?
If you're not playing Kupp,
James Conner
leverage on
Kyron and Kupp. I don't even think so. Where they just like Rams don't show up, I guess. And
I guess the Cardinals are running all over them, and the Rams offense.
Yeah, I guess
you could argue that there's.
I don't know. I just think Rams go Burr.
Let's see if we can find any chalky receivers that we plan to be underweight on, since we're talking about being overweight on Debo and Cup. CD Lamb, I mean, my guess is I end up like I like the idea of game stacking this, like playing Dak with CD Lamb, but then that I think I'm going to end up underweight to CD Lamb as a whole, like just like 18% ownership feels a bit much to me. So given the $8,800 price tag, it's like he's gonna score points. We know there's a pretty high floor there for CD Lamb, but like there are plenty of ways for him to fail because of the price tag. So I could see myself fading CD Lamb overall, despite having some Dak CD stacks. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's a good call. He's what, 1,200 more than Cup, and second highest owned. I mean, like I said, he's a great play. Like he could easily break the slate, like he's done in each of Dallas's last 8 home games, or whenever he faces a team ranking top 5 in man coverage. But I think you nailed it. It's let's go way overweight Dak and have CD stacked every time, and then just way underweight on non-Dak lineups. I think that's smart.
Yeah. Okay. Same page there. Rashee Rice, 6,700, still seems to have elite usage there for the Chiefs. How are we feeling about Rashee Rice?
I mean, he's an amazing play. He's the third best value at the wide receiver position behind Cup and Debo. So I don't know. I need your game theory expertise. Maybe we go through all the wide receivers we like and kind of circle back to it, but I don't know.
So here's the thing that I've been struggling with the past couple of years is we used to get like such condensed ownership to chalk, and we just don't get that anymore. Like because of all the different products, the Sims products that are out there, I feel like the field overall has gotten sharper. The lineups have gotten better. So then it's like the Rashee Rice at 18%. Like it's not the 30% that I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to fade that. I'm going to take advantage of that. It's like they're all pretty spread out. So it's hard for me to really want to fade 18%. Like to me, that number feels fine. Like it's not a slam dunk. I'm not going to jam it in there, but I'm probably going to be close to the field on Rashee Rice. And honestly, I haven't decided if I'll be. My guess is that I end up slightly underweight to 18% Rashee Rice, but it's not like a huge stand I want to take, I guess is my thoughts on it. Just I don't know. It's not the kind of chalk that's like, oh yeah, definitely going to be underweight that.
So must for cash. But like it's still a great play for GPP, but if he's, tied for second highest own, you can get by. Would it be the most, like I like Pacheco. I think he's good leverage. It wouldn't be surprising if it was a Pacheco game or if the touchdowns all just went elsewhere and Rashee Rice was just fine. So yeah, great cash play. You can get by looking somewhere else in tournaments, but good value overall.
Godwin, another one that I see myself coming in underweight here. 16% projected ownership, 6,000 salary. We saw him play from the slot 50% last week, a little bit higher than last week. The ADOT quite low on Godwin. I just think the ownership is high enough that I'm like, I feel like there are better plays here. He really only, if you look at his game log from last year, just like only had one game of 25 fantasy points. In general, he was like fine, but not great. Not somebody you really needed in your GPP lineups. Of course, great last week. We do like to see the slot route come up to 50%. It was like 38% overall last year from the slot. I don't know. To me, this is a fade spot for Chris Godwin. Maybe not full fade, but like underweight. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, so this is a player I have a ton of exposure to. Liam Cohen told us in the offseason he's going to be playing the Cooper Kupp role in this offense. And can you remind me what Cooper Kupp did in the Cooper Kupp role against the Lions last week? The dude went off. And like that makes sense given Detroit's ferocious pass rush. 4.48 odd every other, you can see it on the screen if you scroll to the left. Every other receiver was about 10 points higher. And so it makes sense that, great spot, should go off. But like the flip side of that is Jalen McMillan ran the exact same number of routes as Godwin. He actually ran more routes from the slot. And then Mike Evans is drawing a third of the ownership. What do you do when isn't that like outside the box 101 is,
Yes.
Evans should never be a third of as highly owned. And so like maybe an idea is coming close to like a Buccaneers wide receiver on every lineup. But like I'd kind of want it more evenly split. I don't know. I just I like Evans at ownership, and I like Jalen McMillan a lot. So I don't think he's a must as much as he's up there for cash.
That was going to be the next player I was going to bring up, because that's kind of the way I like playing it. Is, man, Evans at 5% seems like a pretty good bet with Kupp being so chalky. Get that nice leverage. Godwin being so chalky. Get that nice leverage on a very highly owned Chris Godwin. I think Mike Evans at 5% feels like a really strong play here. Just make the bet that he's the one who scores multiple touchdowns. So I am into that on Mike Evans. I imagine I'll be underweight to Chris Godwin, overweight to Mike Evans. Just hope, it's a little bit of recency bias, I think, leading to Chris Godwin being the 4th highest owned receiver on the slate. So I think that is the way I'm going to play this one. Malik Neighbors, you talk about not liking Danny Dimes at all. 16% though against this Commanders defense. Any interest there?
I mean, obviously, this is one of my Exodia wide receivers. I think he's an amazing talent. It is the nuts matchup in terms of like slate breaking upside. Like no player even, like it was like Tyreek Hill and wide receiver ones versus Washington Commanders in terms of who broke the slate last year. And it's more of the same this year. But I think he's a pretty easy fade if he's one of the top 6 highest owned wide receivers. It's just, his usage last week was really uninspiring. Despite shadow coverage, he only ran like 4 routes from the slot, only 1 screen target. Wan'Dale Robinson had 12. Daniel Jones is terrible. So I think you can get by fading him, but I will say like wide receiver ownership rankings is fairly in line with where I'd put it in terms of value, but not that scared of fading Neighbors at this cost and ownership.
I would like it better at a little bit lower ownership. 16% feels about right to me for Neighbors. I think that I'm fine with it. Demarcus Robinson. So let's talk about the tertiary receiving options for the Rams. Demarcus Robinson coming in at 14%. And then where do we have Tyler Johnson? Because that's one that he's looking low owned everywhere around the industry. I worry that he's going to come in higher owned than I'm expecting. But hang on. 9%. I missed him because he's higher here than other places have him. In general, he's been listed around like 4% around the industry. So Fantasy Points does have Tyler Johnson a little bit higher than other places in the industry. So 14% Demarcus Robinson, 9% Tyler Johnson. Is that too high for you? How do you feel about that, Scott?
So Demarcus Robinson is easily the second best wide receiver on this team now. He made me a lot of money last year. Over his last 6 full games with the Rams, he averages 6.8 targets, 14.6 fantasy points per game. 14.6 would be like wide receiver 22 numbers. He's the wide receiver 58 by price on both sites, basically. You can question how much the Puka injury like impacts his role, where he's running like deeper routes, and like maybe Tyler Johnson is just used as like just spam targets on screens and shallow crossers and all that. But no, I think D-Rob should be about twice as highly owned. The Rams' best beat writer is also like the best beat writer in football is Jordan Rodriguez, who we know like texts with the coach and GM, and she was really kind of pumping up. Yeah, where it's like, yes, Tyler Johnson is clearly Puka's backup, but Demarcus Robinson is going to get work. This is who Stafford looks at when plays break down or he's under pressure. And you did see that with the data. I pulled it up via Fantasy Points data, where it's, once D-Rob was a starter, who was his most targeted receiver under pressure? It was Demarcus Robinson, ahead of Puka, ahead of Kupp. And so yeah, I mean, this is just one of my guys at 4K. So I like him a lot. I think he's easily the best sub 5K. Like he's head and shoulders above Yoshi.
Yeah, so
Lazard. So yeah,
I honestly, based on the ownership projections that I've seen elsewhere, I've been super into Tyler Johnson, just as the Matt LaFleur offensive coordinator comes out and says he's the next man up. Like it's next man up, and he is the next man up. Tyler Johnson, we saw he 77 yards last week in the second half. So like the usage last week, pretty promising for Tyler Johnson. And like on top of it, so he's 3,300, looking at low ownership around the industry where it's like, 3%, 4% projected ownership. I'm like, well, that to me is just like the field is missing it. I guess I'll lean into that with Tyler Johnson. Now it looks like the ownership coming up a little bit. So with it being closer between Tyler Johnson and Demarcus Robinson, it's not quite the obvious call that it was when it was a big gap in the ownership. So I think, yeah, I like Demarcus Robinson. I think, as I said, I'm going to be game stacking this one quite a bit. So I think I'll be overweight, I think, to both Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson. Frankly, hard to have much more to say about that. Andre Oshivas kind of falls into that same price range for the Bengals, 3,800, 13% projected ownership for Yoshivas. We still have T. Higgins out. Tough spot against the Chiefs defense. How do you feel about Yoshi?
Again, I really don't trust Burrow's wrist. And I was saying this before the game, how that my Cincy sources were scaring the shit out of me, where he didn't, according to the beats, he didn't look very good all off season, and it was rough. It is a nuts like schematic matchup against Kansas City too high. The fantasy points data film charters also said, if that pressure doesn't get there, like their secondary is rough. But no, I'm just, he was an ass guy. I'll give him that too, but I'm just not playing a chalky Yoshi. I think D-Rob crushes him. I think Tyler crushes him. And there's a lot of these sub 4K wide receivers who excite me.
What about in a Chiefs stack? I think that's the spot where I think I'll play some Yoshi as the bring back, just because Jamar Chase is so expensive. And the
I
price
feel like you
tag
have to play Chase there though. Because like I don't see, because Chiefs need to get pushed, right? Let's say, and like that's the only way they're pushing them.
Okay, so you're more into Chase than Yoshi, even as a bring back. Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more into Yoshi than you are, but I guess you're saying at 13% ownership, you think you're going to be under, like, I'm guessing you would have some, or would you have any Yoshi in a like 150 set?
Probably not.
Okay, so you are completely out on Yoshi. I like him better.
150s. Yeah, I don't know what it looks. I'm not an MME guy, but it's just I would rather pick my spots with a Adonai Mitchell, a Jalen Naylor, or Tyler Johnson, all those other sub 4K, and be different. And hope I nail a guy at 0.5% that no one else has, and the 15% are flops.
Yep. No, that's I like it. I like you. You're taking a stand. I think I'm following you all the way on the stand, but I think I'm following you to the extent that I'll probably be underweight to Yoshi. I'll have him in some lineups. I don't hate him as the bring back. I think, he could, if Yoshi's scoring, then that's a good thing for the Chiefs stack as well. So I don't hate the idea of Yoshi as a bring back, but I do like that call of Jamar Chase is going to be pretty low owned. Probably Yoshi is actually the more popular bring back. Like when you just look at the salaries of if you're playing Patrick Mahomes, he's pretty expensive. You play, Kelsey or Rashee Rice. If you try and double stack that, it gets really expensive. So then the easy way to save salary is to throw Yoshi in there. So my guess is Yoshi actually becomes the more popular bring back. So then you throw in Chase and you're just it's more salary, but there are other ways to get cheaper using receivers. So maybe that is the way to play it. It's just play the expensive Chiefs stack with the expensive Jamar Chase, and then get your value options from other games. My guesses will be somewhat contrarian. So I guess I think I'm largely with you on this. All right, let me bring it back to the ownership so you can take a look at.
Can you help me out here? So this is where I struggle, is what to do with the ownership. Do I just play? So how I wrote it up was I break it up into the cash plays, who are also the best plays, and then the best GPP plays over 5.5% ownership, and then the best, below 5.5% owned GPP plays. I wrote it up: Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Rashee Rice, Demarcus Robinson, maybe Tyler Johnson if you really need the savings, as the cash best values. And then for GPPs over 5.5%, I wrote it up as Godwin 1, CeeDee Lamb 2, Malik Neighbors 3. But again, really with that 16%, I feel comfortable coming in under that. And then I have a ton of guys below that I did write up. So there's no one else above 5.5%. I did write up, I did write up St. Brown, but I took him off where it's just I love Jared Goff and he's my favorite stacking partner. So didn't feel that was necessary. Not going to play him in non-Goff lineups. And then Garrett Wilson, Maybe I wrote him up and then deleted it, not sure. But so of the sub 5% guys, number one I had was Lad McConkey. And so this is just, I know you like him because you like your Herbert stacks. So really like the prospect when he was healthy, a massive PPR cheat code upside. He crushed zone coverage, elite numbers against zone. And like, what did we see from him in his debut is he led the team and ranked top 15 among all wide receivers in target share. This would have been a player I went all in on had I known DJ Chark would start the season on IR. And now Josh Palmer's questionable. It's a great matchup. It's zone heavy matchup. Josh Palmer, even if he plays, has always sucked against zone coverage relative to man. It's a bad defense. The Panthers, Derek Carr had nearly as many touchdowns as incompletions last week. I really think like Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball 40 times, but if they don't, I can see McConkey easily getting there. I quibble with, or I question the upside, but he stood out to me as a play I haven't heard anyone mention, but like the usage was great and love the player.
All right. Sounds to me like you did not listen to my show from yesterday. So noted, Scott. 61.9% route participation for Lad McConkey last week. Honestly, lower than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be basically full-time slot. It was sort of promising to see him line out wide. 38.1%. I mean, you know this stuff better than I do. Like what that actually means. Like to me, that seems promising because everybody was saying that he's going to be limited to the slot. He's just going to play the slot, which that's great. But like he ended up 75% route participation. That's pretty promising to me for a first NFL game. Led the team in targets, as you said, 7 targets for Lad McConkey. So against this gross, Panthers defense, I like the spot for McConkey. So you are absolutely right. I like that. I am a sucker for Josh Palmer. I think assuming he's good to go. I know that he was briefly limited. I think that the latest I saw was Josh Palmer is good to go. And where do we have the ownership on? Okay, 4%. So it's not that much lower. But he seems like he's had some very, very long, like you just look at his like longest touchdowns or longest plays from last year. It's like, man, he has some like 40, 50s. I think he had a 70-yarder. Like he just breaks off those big plays, which against this Panthers defense seems like something he could do. So do you have any interest in Josh Palmer?
No, I haven't heard that he's playing.
Oh, you have not heard? I could be totally wrong about that.
I just searched. I couldn't find anything. Maybe you saw something I didn't. All I'm saying is that he got fined for something last week. But he didn't really do much last week. He did get ejected from the game. That's what he was fined for. But he still played like 95% of the game. Really what it comes down to is, and again, McConkey out alphaed him, but it's the nuts schematic matchup for McConkey. Historically elite against zone in college. That was exactly the case in week 1. I think he had a top 5 target per route run against zone last week. And then Palmer historically sucks against zone, is great against man coverage. And so he's going to see zone at one of the highest rates. It just does not strike me as a Palmer week. But then again, Quentin Johnson sucks. The big concern for me with QJ, with McConkey is just target volume for a Jim Harbaugh offense that could just run the ball 40 times.
So you're not interested in any of the like Quentin Johnson, Josh Palmer. Lad McConkey is the only one you would play, but even Lad McConkey, it's like, but still might not just have that target volume. I think that's fair. I'm more into the other options. I mean, QJ is bad. Like we know that he's bad, but 82.1% route participation. I might even think about QJ, but I'll definitely have, if he plays, I'll have some shots on Josh Palmer. If Josh Palmer doesn't play, probably mostly Lad McConkey. Maybe I'll take a couple shots on QJ. Not a strong stance I'm taking there. Definitely not a huge fan of playing a ton of QJ.
Next on my list.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Jalen Naylor.
Yes.
And so I love to hear this. Chris Wecht and the projections were fully in line with me. We're way higher than anyone else in the industry on him. And like, I just wanted to be higher on it because this is the ass god. This is the ass king. Like, how sick would it be to win $1 million? But like, how much sicker would it be to win $1 million with the ass god at 0.1% ownership? But I legitimately think he's a great play. So he only saw 1 target last week, but he scored a touchdown on that target. And when he did, the television announcer said, quote unquote, Kevin O'Connell told us that Jalen Naylor was going to be the TJ Hawkinson until TJ Hawkinson comes back, which like, obviously he didn't see that usage last week, but like he was banged up. And so like, that's a super valuable role. And again, like 42% route share last week, but came into the game banged up. And then Jordan Addison, who's out this week after his injury, Naylor played on 80% of the passing snaps. And so like, even if he is still banged up, it looks like he's full go by the injury reports. They don't have any choice, I think, but to play him full time. I think he's just good at ball. Kind of sick in college. He was more productive than Keon Coleman and Jaden Reed. And on a very small sample, asked God over the last 2 seasons and star of Vikings training camp. So,
yeah, it's funny. I did a full game by game breakdown, and initially I was like, I feel like I can't put Jalen Naylor in there. Like he projects too poorly, like across the industry. Like I was like, I feel like you should project better than this. Like everywhere is like projects for 5 fantasy points around the industry. It feels like it has not really moved up that much. The latest that I saw today, I did add him to my write up because I was like, I can't really in good conscience leave him out. With Jordan Addison out, Jalen Naylor, the wide receiver 2 there, should have a big role for the Vikings. So I did add him. But yeah, definitely the 9.2 projection on Jalen Naylor, I think, is the highest I've seen anywhere in the industry. And I like that. I think,
wait, who has him at 9.2%?
Fantasy points. Not ownership. That's his projection.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was like,
9.2 projection.
I think we have him 0.1% owned.
Let's see. I mean, that could, these things also, they change as sites update all their stuff. And, some of the sites are slower than others to update everything. But yeah, basically zero ownership on Jalen Naylor. I like it. That's a hero call from Scott on Jalen Naylor. I think I will follow you there with the Jalen Naylor call. I think he's very much in play as the probably number 2 receiver for the Vikings, maybe 3 behind Aaron Jones, I guess. But he can break open a big play. I like it.
This is just my gal brain. Like this is my convict. Like he's the ass god. I'm excited to freaking play the ass god, but I have a few more Jalen Naylor-esque plays. Jalen McMillan's $300 less. Like I said, tied Godwin in routes last week, ran more routes from the slot. He looked absolutely awesome. This is a prospect I loved. I was higher on him than almost anyone else. Came really close to scoring a sick touchdown. Highest over under of the slate. Godwin's chalk. So I think he is a good play. Another guy in that Jalen Naylor price range, Luke McCaffrey. So he was another ass guy last week. He was top 6 in ass, or top 7. Jim Nagy told me all off season, Luke McCaffrey is this year's Puka Nacua. If you don't know, Jim Nagy was a scout for the Super Bowl winning Patriots and a number of other Super Bowl winning teams. Now he's the director of the Senior Bowl. Was like the player he was most convicted in. Was Luke McCaffrey is this year's Puka Nacua. He told me that like 5 separate times. Cliff Kingsbury, we know, loves slot wide receivers. Slot wide receivers always go off in this offense, while outside wide receivers are woefully underused. We saw that with Terry McLaurin's static alignment, 95% of his routes aligned to the left. He's going to draw the Giants' only good DB in Deonte Banks. Only 63% route share last week, but I just think he's interesting. No one's talking about him. So those would be the Jalen Naylor, Tyler Johnson, Andre Ioshivas price range. Obviously, Demarcus Robinson, probably the best value under 5K or whatever it is.
Dan Quinn this week says of Luke McCaffrey, yeah, I think it's going to go like this. We're going to see more reps coming. It's like, man, that's promising. Like just hearing the coach say, like, yeah, he's gonna be a rocket ship. That's exactly speaking our language as fantasy players. Rocket ship Luke McCaffrey coming in at virtually zero ownership. I like that call. There's another like different way to get different with Jaden Daniels, right? Like, because we're playing 12% Jaden Daniels. What if you just throw Luke McCaffrey in that lineup? You're bringing down the overall ownership of the stack pretty significantly. Really inexpensive. So I like that. I like that call quite a bit. And I don't even think I wrote up Luke McCaffrey. I thought about it this week, but he's another one that just like didn't project well enough. And I don't think I ended up adding him, but I maybe I'll have to do that because I think I'm with you. That feels like a pretty solid play this week.
Historically, that's kind of when I do my best, is when like the field has like a sub 4K guy who's 14%, and then I'll nail a sub 4K who's 1% who scores like 3 times as many points or whatever. But yeah, Xavier Worthy again, Bengals single high coverage. It just seems like a nuts schematic matchup. He's not drawing any ownership because like the projections hate him because he only had 4
touches.
Yeah, 4 touches last week. But dude is the fastest kid alive. He seems like this is the guy who just breaks slates weeks where like, yeah, it makes sense. The projections aren't there, but like sky high upside, who's just built different, who can, drop 20 plus fantasy points and 4 touches. He also ran the go route at the highest rate in the league last week. So he's still fairly one-dimensional, but like that's the perfect matchup for it, is Patrick Mahomes against the single high Bengals. And then we mentioned Mike Evans as a contrarian play. Only other one I had on my list was Amari Cooper, which is just like YOLO. Like I know Deshaun Watson's terrible, but he led all players in air yards last week. He ranked 7th in XFP, saw 9 targets. David Njoku's out. With just like a little bit better accuracy, he easily could have hit 25 DK last week. He averaged 30.7 over his last 3 games with Joe Flacco. Tyson Campbell's out for the Jaguars, so that's huge for him. And then he also played man coverage 73% of the time last week. There's no way that sticks. That would be like basically impossible, but like that would be so insane for Amari Cooper if that sticks.
Missing the 2 top cornerbacks there for Jacksonville. Yeah, it's tough because like I'm like, man, Deshaun Watson just is broken. I don't really want to be playing much of the Browns, but also like, man, that seems like a good spot. If they're ever going to hit, that would be the spot. David Njoku out, just like more target volume potentially. So I like that call on Amari Cooper at low ownership. Let me see if I have anybody else that I like. Brandon Ayuk, do you think he's ready yet? Like, is he playable? We talk about everybody on San Francisco. We talk about Debo, but theoretically, Ayuk would get more volume without Christian McCaffrey if he is ready to go. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, he's leverage on Debo, but I think I'm just going to eat the Debo chalk, or actually, 2 or 3x the field on Debo. But I could see it. Maybe it's just a way for me to get weird with my Purdy and Debo stacks.
Trenton Irwin is another. He's coming in lower owned than Yoshi. What was his actual route participation last week? Trenton Irwin, 60% route participation, 2 targets last week. So not super promising. I don't know. Do you have any interest there?
No, again.
So sorry, I wasn't looking at you. So I didn't know.
No, that's right. That's on me, bro. No, it's the Burrow wrist. And it's, I just gave you a bunch of sub 4K guys who excite me. Trent Irwin's not one of them.
Okay. All right. Just scrolling. It's not really, doesn't seem like it's going to be a Rashid Shaheed week against Dallas defense. Obviously
that's a man heavy. We play him against zone, but it could happen. Shaheed's just awesome. And, and I'm like historically an Olave hater just because like last year, or like even like 2 years ago, it's just like, hey, it's weird that like everyone likes Olave so much more, but like by yards per route run, he's almost even with Shaheed. And then what did we see last week? I mean, Olave is honestly like a good contrarian play for that reason, just because no one's on him, and like Saints offense looked awesome. But I don't know. I'm picking different spots. Judy is interesting. I went with Amari, but like Chris's projections like him, and I don't hate it. He came into the game a little banged up, so the route share was low. You saw like Elijah outplay him, but he looked really good. 8 targets, easily best target per route run. So I don't know. Yeah. I'm not doing that, but it's an idea for the MME bros out there.
Yeah, target volume at least promising there for Judy. A couple other names I want to throw. I mean, Rashad Bateman, I think is again just going to be a boomer bust kind of play at 3,900, 1% ownership. To me, that feels like a pretty good spot to play Rashad Bateman. I know he was somewhat disappointing last week. Like people were like, oh man, he really didn't get it done, but it was like he was kind of fine. Like he ended up outscoring his projection and he had like multiple long shots where he could have had a big game last week, even though he didn't get there. 5 targets, 118 air yards last week, actually led the team in air yards. Some of them, let's see, do you have any end zone targets? I don't know. He had some targets that seemed like they could have been, I guess, just one end zone target technically for Bateman, but I don't know. How do you feel about Bateman at 3,900, 1% ownership? Any interest there?
He had more yards than Andrews and Zay combined. So there's that. He's also an ass guy.
Yeah.
I just think it's a Derrick Henry week.
Okay, you're not playing it through it. And then the other one, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, am I crazy to even bring him up? I like this game so much. Every other part of the game getting crazy high ownership. Marvin Harrison, didn't look great last week. Had 1 catch on 3 targets for 4 yards. There's nothing promising about what we saw last week. But prior to last week, he was a guy that we were drafting in the second round. He has a great.
Oh, we were drafting.
I was drafting in the first or second round. All right, fair enough.
So what I will say about him is like he had the stone worst matchup for him. Trey McBride had the stone best possible matchup for him against Buffalo's cloud coverage too high. MHJ had like one of the highest average depth of routes in the league last week, so it makes sense. You're not going to do anything against Buffalo, best in the league against the deep ball and deeper routes. So all that makes sense. And so I certainly get it as like a contrarian play. To me, I just think we kind of overrate Arizona's offense or passing attack rather. I think Drew Petzig's a donkey. I could see it. I'm picking different spots. There's other players I'm more convicted in.
Okay. I think that we have covered largely.
Rams did play single high at a crazy high rate. So he could last week. So it could be going from like a worst possible matchup to a best. He's really their single high man beater. And Trey McBride's really the 2 high beater, but I don't know. Rams were kind of closer to even, like middle of the pack last year. So I don't know. It could happen, but I wouldn't really be betting on it at this point.
Okay, that's fair. I need to note. Mr. T says, "Oh, is this where the show went?" Yeah, still people trying to find this show, which we would appreciate you. Tell your friends that we have moved over to the Fantasy Points channel. This is where we're going live Saturday afternoons this year, trying to bring over we had over 10,000 viewers sometimes last week. So hopefully more and more people start finding us on the Fantasy Points channel because it's same old show. Now I will say you kind of benefit as fewer people are watching. I guess that is the benefit to the viewer, but we'd appreciate it if you tell your friends, get more people over here to Outside the Box on the Fantasy Points channel every Saturday. Let's move on, talk about tight ends. And we've talked a little bit about Trey McBride. He is actually not that chalky. 8% projected ownership on McBride. 6,000. If we do see Harrison struggle at all, that'll be good news for McBride if he can, kind of maintain that number 1 target option for the Cardinals. Last week, McBride 84.2% route participation, 9 targets. So that was all very promising, I thought, on McBride. But I don't know if that's the spot that you want to start. Would you? Let's talk. I guess I already brought him up. So let's talk about McBride. Any interest there?
Yeah, he's fine. I don't know. Given my Stafford exposure, I expect to end up with a good bit of him.
Okay.
Probably MHJ too. Kobe Parkinson, that's my top cash tight end, but there's always credence to fading the chalkiest tight end of the week. I'm not going to have any Travis Kelce. If he just buries me, that's fine. I'll live with that. Jordan Akins, I don't think is an exceptionally better play than a Shoemaker or some of these other cheap guys. So I don't know. I don't think that's great. Ingram, Andrews, whatever. Ingram's like route share dipped crazy low last week, and his snap share dipped too. And we heard beat writers kind of hinting at that. And so it was weird that happened, although he did destroy the Browns when he played last year without Christian Kirk, but he wasn't a guy on my list. my favorite from the top, I don't know, it looks like 12 is Brock Bowers for GPPs.
I like it. Brock Bowers, 5% projected ownership at 4,400. Super promising first game where you see 8 targets in his first NFL game. You had some concerns about where is he going to fall in the pecking order with Devontae Adams there. Jacoby Myers, kind of a target hog last year. Michael Mayer, another tight end there to potentially cut into it. No concerns. 8 targets in his first game. He's cheap. He's not getting a ton of ownership. I'm with you there. Do you want to expound on that play at all?
Yeah, it's like how excited are we to like play? Were we to play Kyle Pitts last week, or everyone excited to? But it's like Brock Bowers is probably like the real greatest tight end prospect ever, and then he got like the usage that it took Kyle Pitts 3 years in the NFL to get. He ranked 12th in route share, 73%, excellent. 3rd in target share, 24%. 3rd in fantasy points scored, and I've just been kicking myself for not having more of him in best ball or in redraft, where it's like with Jamar Chase's rookie year in April, I was like, I'm going to have this guy in every single league. I don't care if he's, a round 2 cost. And then it was like, oh, he looks terrible in training camp. He's so rusty from the year off, blah, blah, blah. And like, I backed off of him and I was like, all right, I'm never going to do that again. And then there's the Brock Bowers all offseason. I'm like elite prospect. He's going to break leagues. He's landing spot proof. And then he goes to the Raiders and I'm like, yeah, I don't know about it. And so I don't have enough exposure. So like, I'm for sure going to get my DFS exposure this week.
Somebody asked in chat, does the Baltimore matchup scare you off him at all?
Not really, just because like the usage was so creative with him, where they're really trying to get him the ball in so many different ways. He feels a little bit matchup proof, at least at 4,400, so for the target share and the talent, all this other stuff.
And if he doesn't do well this week, we just martingale it, right? Like, because this is sort of a tough matchup. I don't even know who they're playing next week, but presumably it'll be an easier matchup. Like that'll be just a smash play next week if he doesn't do really well this week, I would think. But
I'm just hoping he's like really just such a focal point of the offense, where he's like you move him around. He's a mismatch guy, and like Derrick Henry's going to score 2 touchdowns on the first 2 drives, and the Raiders are going to score none, and then they're just going to play catch up the entire game and lean crazy pass heavy. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. So
yeah, Jordan Akins sounded like you're not very into him. He did have I want to say 77% route participation in the second half last week after Njoku left the game. Do you think that was just because like they planned for Njoku and they, there's like, all right, I guess we'll throw in the other tight end, or do you think it's going to hold up that he is used pretty heavily?
No, the route share is going to be there. I don't know about the target share. Yeah. After the Njoku injury, it was just like a 0.12 targets per route run. They ran a ton of plays though, so I think it was like three targets in like 2 quarters, something like that. But it's just Luke Schoonmaker's at 1%, so that excites me more.
Okay, yep, that's reasonable. I think we need to talk about the Ravens a little bit. Both Andrews and Likely, neither of them actually getting that crazy high ownership. Andrews 5% projected ownership, Likely 2% projected ownership. I know you already said that you're playing it through Henry, so not like super into the Ravens pass catchers in general. But any interest in either of these guys, Andrews or Likely? Are you worried about Andrews going forward? How do you feel about this tight end room in general? 12 targets last week for Isaiah Likely, 2 for Mark Andrews. So and I know a lot of people are worried about Andrews right now. There are polls going around Twitter. Who would you rather have rest of season, Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely? I fall into it's still Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews still going to be the top tight end here, but definitely bullish week, first week for Isaiah Likely. How are you feeling about these guys?
Yeah, so Andrews was great in ass last week. Top of any tight end, which came as a big surprise to people. Part of that is he saw the most double coverage he's seen in any game of his career, according to Nate Yonke of PFF. And Lamar Jackson constantly under fire, how to get the ball out quick. Andrews was running these deeper routes, which lends itself more towards, week to week volatility, but also upside. And so he's in play. I think honestly, like Likely is more exciting to me. I was sort of betting against him with my fab dollars in redraft leagues off waivers. But I mean, the guy just outscored the next closest tight end by 2x last week. he looked awesome. He basically played the Zay Flowers role, and he looked better at that than Zay Flowers has in any game of his career. So maybe there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. He was a guy I thought would be like 10%, and so 2% is a little surprising. I don't know. I don't know how much I'm going to have, but that definitely stood out to me as well.
And then the other one that I need to bring up is Sam Laporta, because you talked about wanting to play so much Jared Goff. How much of a priority is Sam Laporta going to be for you in your Goff lineups and then also your non-Goff lineups? I mean, 4% seems pretty low. How are you feeling about it?
Not a lot. I'm kind of gravitating more towards the cheaper guys, just because like, look at how bad tight end was last week. Foster Moreau scored the second most fantasy points, and he only ran 8 routes on the entire day. And so like absolute dumpster fire wasteland. And we saw the same thing last year too, where week 1 was an absolute dumpster fire. Week 2 is pretty bad. And so like it took a while for tight ends to get up to speed. That might be nothing. That might just be a coincidence. But with as bad as the position looked, I'm not all that eager to be paying up outside of for stacks. Again, Brett really likes Laporta, great matchup, all that. I lean a little bit more towards St. Brown, but I get it. But personally, it's like, yeah, why not a Hunter Henry? Why not a Luke Schoonmaker or full on punt with Theo Johnson? I don't know. I haven't really thought that far ahead, but I feel like I'd be more inclined to just punt and pay up for some of the other expensive guys I'm excited about.
Okay. Let me just open it up to you. Tight ends you want to talk about on the slate? Anybody we haven't already hit on?
No, we're done, I think.
No George
It's
Kittle
gross.
for you. No, I don't know. Tyler Conklin. I don't know who else I would be. We talked about Freiermuth as you could stack him.
Yeah. I think all those are fine. I was a big Conklin guy in best ball. Kittle, he could always get there. We know he has massive upside. I think this is probably not the week for it against the blitz heavy Vikings, but like it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world. You look at it as just like his fantasy output, and it's like 3 fantasy points, 30, crazy upside for a tight end, and break the slate, leverage off of Debo, all that. Probably not, but I get it from a theory standpoint.
Is Dulcich in play? Somebody asked in chat.
I don't think so. I think that's a situation where I need to see it from a tight end in that offense before I believe in it.
Jeremy asked about Evan Ingram. We kind of talked about Evan Ingram a little bit earlier. It sounds like you're not super into Ingram with a seemingly reduced role last week.
No. Route share really came down. Snap share really came down. Maybe that's nothing. I don't know, but just doesn't get me excited. He's kind of expensive.
That's a good question. 888 asked about Tucker Kraft. We do have, I mean, it's tough to want to play anybody on the Packers with Malik Willis as the quarterback. Yeah, it was so promising with Jordan Love still there, but now really tough to want to play anybody.
Well, the coach also said he wants closer to 50-50 split.
Okay.
Said that 2 days ago.
Zach Ertz, I guess, as we talk about Jaden Daniels, another kind of low ownership.
Hey, that's yeah, no kidding. I think he's dust, but like it's a good role in that offense.
Yeah. Okay, so we're done with tight end. You want to build a couple lineups? Yeah.
Let me just say on Schoonmaker, is a round 2 pick 2 years ago. Elite measurables, 91st percentile Spork. He had a 100% route share after the Ferguson injury. Dallas's tight end 1 is ranked top 10 at the position in targets in 8 of 9 seasons. So it could be like a chicken and the egg thing where it's like maybe Dak just loves tight ends. $3,000 on DraftKings, 1%. He's fine. Fine play.
All right, we're gonna make some lineups. I do want to say I mentioned people like tell your friends, come over to watch channel. Also subscribe while you're here. If you're watching this channel, not enough people who are watching are subscribed to the Fantasy Point channel, and it's a nice thing. You go on YouTube and it'll remind you, we can watch Outside the Box, and plenty of great content here on the Fantasy Points channel. I think every day of the week, or close to every day of the week, there is just so much great content here on the Fantasy Points channel. So highly recommend it. If you have not already subscribed, do so. You could even turn on the notification bell to get notifications every time people go live on this channel, because there is a lot of fantastic content. There's dynasty content, season-long content, a lot of DFS content, a lot of great stuff here. All right, are we ready to make some lineups?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Where do you want to start? Where's our stack?
I'd like you to start. I feel like I just brain dumped a lot of information at you, a lot of players, and I need you to absorb it, synthesize it, and put out the optimal lineup using the information I gave you.
Okay, just steal all of your information to make the winning lineup.
Well, disregard anything you disagree with. Just throw that out. But the things that you agreed with that also makes sense from a theory standpoint.
Jared Goff with Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be kind of a unique way to start. Not a lot of people going to start Jared Goff with Amon-Ra. I think I do like to double stack when I'm playing Jared Goff.
Okay.
So this is where I think you might want to come in with the I'd be fine going with Laporta. Sounds like you'd rather pay down, though. We could throw Jahmyr Gibbs in for the double stack. JMO I'd be fine with double stacking with JMO.
I feel like I'd leave all that for the end because that is tricky. And it's also tricky on the opposite side with the three Buccaneers wide receivers.
We both like the idea of Kyron. So particularly in a lineup where I'm not playing Kyler or Stafford, I like the idea of throwing Kyron into this lineup. 6,800. Defense, maybe we just throw that in there to like kind of get an idea of how much salary we're going to have. So just find a cheap defense that looks okay to us. I think the Chargers look pretty interesting.
Oh, you know what? That's what we needed to do. We needed to talk defense because.
Oh, you want to? Okay. Well, let's just do it here.
Yeah. Yesterday we skipped defense, or last week we skipped defense.
Oh, we do have ownership
and someone commented, is like, that's a mistake to do it. Like every time I've ever shipped a tournament, my defense scored like 20 plus points. And then like what happened? It's like the defense is playing Deshaun Watson, Bryce Young, Daniel Jones went off. It's also week one where offenses are at their absolute sloppiest. So that was so dumb of us to skip it.
Okay, let's talk about defense, but I want to answer this question because Mr. D asked, will you or do you guys ever do underdog content? Yes, Friday nights, you can get Jake Tribby, Ryan Heath doing great underdog battle royale content. And it's I was not there last night. I had my anniversary dinner. So I went out last night, was not there to watch it, but I caught a little bit of it the previous week. We went and watched some of it. Just two guys who are really sharp into the data, talking about how they're approaching battle royale on Friday nights. Highly recommend that. If you like battle royale stuff, go check that out right here on the Fantasy Points channel. Okay, now let's talk about defenses. So every show I'm on, we just skip defenses, and it's just like, yeah, just pick your favorite, whatever, because it's so difficult to predict. I think is generally the reason we don't talk about it. But you're right, it can have a big impact. So you sound like you have some opinions on defenses this week. Who are your favorite defense? I'm not even going to ask you. I'm not going to suggest any to you. I'm just going to let you tell me who you want to play this week at defense.
Yeah, so I was just saying we should have talked about it. I was hoping you had more answers than I did. I needed to spend more time with it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Chargers to me did stand out, or Jaguars did stand out to me as one of the best plays. Chargers are good too. Again, remember what I was saying about the game script sensitive running backs. So it makes a ton of sense to stack a J.K. Dobbins with the Chargers, Brian Robinson with the Commanders against Daniel Jones, Derrick Henry and the Ravens, Jonathan Taylor and the Colts against Malik Willis, Najee Harris and the Steelers. So that's going to be a lot of it for me. But yeah, obviously Jaguars and Chargers stand up at the top. According to our projections, like good values coming from Saints, an underrated defense, Vikings, Tampa. I don't know that they have like the ceiling of a Jaguars or Chargers given the matchup, but that's something to keep in mind.
I'm torn on the Broncos just because we know that Justin Fields gets sacked quite a bit, so it's like, all right, just defense against Justin Fields. But then if
Yeah,
they don't throw the ball enough, then it's like what you really want is like
right.
pick six, like is big play upside from the defense, and just like a few sacks feels like at least a pretty high floor on the Broncos defense. It's also just a really bad defense. I don't know. How do you feel about Broncos defense taking advantage of Justin Fields' tendency to take sacks, not being the best offense in the league? Is it a good GPP play, do you think?
I think you nailed it. I think Fields is always one of the best quarterbacks to stream defenses against, but the equation changes when it's Arthur Smith and you're only dropping back, 35% of the time you would have with a different OC.
Mohammed suggests Packers. I think that's an interesting play against Anthony Richardson. I also think the other side of the Colts facing the Packers. I don't know if you brought them up already, but with Malik Willis, starting for the Packers, another defense.
Yeah, Colts great. You can stack them with Jonathan Taylor, but you don't need to. Again, I think Malik Willis is really bad.
Yeah, I will say I think in general for me, like my approach, if I'm hand building, looking for a defense, I'm mostly just targeting the opposing quarterback and just looking at like, all right, which of these quarterbacks is most likely to take sacks or turn the ball over, more importantly. So that's the biggest factor for me. It's not the actual strength of the defense. It helps, like if you have a good defense against a quarterback who takes a lot of sacks, gives the ball up, I prefer that. But in general, I'm mostly targeting the quarterback. All right, anything else on defenses?
No, we're already running late. We should probably just build a lineup.
All right. So we're Goff, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Kyron Williams so far, looking at defenses that we could potentially play. We just talked about some defenses that are interesting. Seahawks seems fine. 3,000.
Well, why are we starting with defense?
Just to see, get our salary kind of in line. Yeah. We don't have to if you have other position. I mean, tight end, do you want to just play Colby Parkinson? Do you like somebody else there?
I don't know why we need to play the chalkiest tight end of the week.
We don't need to. I thought you said, Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, low ownership. He's 4,400. Let's just go there, right? Yeah,
or we can go cheaper if we end up needing it.
Okay. Other running backs to consider here. I'd be fine with James Conner. Jahmyr Gibbs kind of makes sense in this, probably.
You can play him.
All right, let's try it on, see how it fits.
Mm-hmm.
All right, wide receiver. So we have so many great cheap options. Sounded like Jalen Naylor is one of your favorites at very low ownership. Now I'm debating, are we getting too contrarian with this lineup? We do have Kyron in there. We can afford to go chalky here. So I'd say, I mean, you like DeMarcus Robinson and Jalen Naylor. What if we did both of them?
Okay.
You hate that idea. You laugh at that idea. Okay. Now we have 9,800 left for a defense and a flex. So this is where you kind of play all right, who's available at flex. I think mid 6,000s is kind of the range we're probably looking at. We could go cheaper and more expensive at defense.
I'd go with my one of my game script running backs stacked with the defense. So Henry, Taylor, B-Rob, Najee.
All right, Ravens defense too expensive here with Henry. If we did this, we could go down from Naylor to Tyler Johnson and put Baltimore in here.
You also go down from Bowers if we wanted.
True, but do we want to pay up for the Ravens defense? I guess they are playing Vegas.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's see what this looks like with Tyjo over D-Rob. It's not my favorite lineup in the world, but it's a good example to use.
Yeah. Pay up at defense for the Ravens. There you go. Jared Goff double stacked with Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. We don't have any kind of Tampa Bay bring back in this one.
Yeah, so that's where
McMillian instead of Naylor?
Yeah, can we do that? Then I think it's good.
Where is McMillion's price tag? I think he's right around here. Oh yeah, 3,600. Then we have 400 left.
Oh, someone raises a good point. Does it matter that you're playing Bowers against Ravens defense?
Oh yeah. I mean,
To me, it didn't really. Just because, like I said, what's going to happen is Derrick Henry scores touchdowns in the first 2 drives, and then Bowers gets spammed cheap, easy, low ADOT PPRs. He doesn't need to score a touchdown. Like, tight end position sucks, but it could be could be a good point. I don't know. You would know
I'd
more
say
than
like
I would.
so it's generally something. Yeah, I would, if I were using an optimizer for a large field GPP on a slate with this many games on it, I would probably have a rule set to not have the defense against an opposing player. But I don't think it is like the biggest thing in the world. Like, it's a slight negative correlation. So yeah, I try to avoid it just because you have so many options that you don't need to do it. But also it's like just one player against the defense, certainly not the end of the world. I just threw in Isaiah Likely here, just go full Baltimore, but I don't know if I like that better.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I don't like that. I don't think.
all right, just throw.
A question I would have is, do you feel like we need a Chiefs player, maybe Pacheco? Do you feel like we need some piece of, I don't know, Dallas? I don't know.
What is Pacheco's price tag? He's right around the same as Henry, right? Pacheco 6,900, Henry 67, and then what are the Chiefs? Could we go to Pacheco? Oh, we could go Pacheco with the Chiefs instead of
do that too,
Henry
yeah.
with the Ravens, and suddenly it looks better.
You think so?
I think so.
Okay.
Oh, we have 7,600 left now. So now it's like, oh, we could get Kupp in this lineup, man.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that is just, what if we just did that? Now we have Kyron and Kupp, so we don't have any of the like leverage angle of Kyron over Kupp, but like, what if they just, but now we have 3 Rams. It's borderline. It's more than I'd like, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's too much. Like, if somebody showed me the lineup, I wouldn't be like, no, you can't play that, but it's not like my favorite.
Someone says to take Ty Johnson out. Maybe a different
Tyler
defense
Johnston.
too. Oh, actually,
Yeah.
Chiefs defense is kind of nice if we're fading the chalkiest quarterback of the slate.
And then go back to Pacheco.
Oh no, I was saying keep Kupp and see what we can do.
All right. But then we only have 3,300 left over is the problem.
Yeah, so all right, fine. Change Chiefs to what's one of the
keeping Kupp. I'll move him to the wide receiver for now, because now we have 3,300 left. I guess
change
there
it
are
to
no running
Saints.
backs here anyway.
Change it to Saints. That's a way Lamb doesn't hit.
So now we're looking at
Back to D-Rob.
D-Rob again.
Adonai Mitchell.
Who do you prefer?
I mean, D-Rob for sure, but three Rams I'm fine with. Whatever.
Yeah. And you like D-Rob better than Tyler
We
Johnson?
just talked about, well, yeah, I guess this is contrarian enough, right?
Yeah. So do you want to go Mitchell since we already have two Rams?
You tell me. You're the
I would prefer to just have 2 Rams. I would prefer not to have more.
Okay. All right. Yeah, you could play Mitchell. Or we could do Naylor in a different defense.
Yeah. Let's do this. Let's try this one.
Okay.
It's good enough. All right. Now, man, we started with Goff that one.
Hey, someone left a comment that said Scott seems really annoyed with the co-host. I just have to pee so badly. Do you mind if I?
All right.
All right.
You go pee. All right. While Scott is, crushing his stress ball because he's so mad at me, I'll start thinking about how I want to start this next lineup. I like the idea of Jaden Daniels. We talked about Jaden Daniels and then throw in Luke McCaffrey in at wide receiver, get a little bit different that way. So we got a chalky quarterback, but we bring down the ownership with Luke McCaffrey here. Now, again, because we're not doing, I like Kyler quite a bit, but because we're not doing a Kyler lineup, I like the idea of throwing James Conner in there. I kind of like the idea of doing double running back. Now, I think there's like a little bit of negative correlation with running backs from opposing teams. So I'm a little bit hesitant to do it, but I also think James Conner and Kyren Williams could just crush. I think, Kyren has that pass catching upside, so I don't totally hate it with this combination. I think it should be a high scoring game. So I'm thinking about just doing James Conner with Kyren also. All right, we'll try that. Now, wide receivers, I really am into Tyler Johnson, and we took him out of the last one. So I think I'm going to throw Ty Joe into this one. So now we have 2 Rams, 1 Cardinals. We're doing kind of a game stack, a secondary game stack there with the Cardinals and the Rams. I also, Scott's back. I was gonna just throw in Wan'Dale Robinson before he got back just to piss him off, but I won't do it. I won't throw him. He's already pissed off at me. He's already crushing his stress ball because he's so mad that we're overtime.
I just had to pee so bad. I feel great now. I'm feeling awesome.
Chris Ostro just brought up Jordan Mason. Yeah, that's a good point. I did not throw, I forgot about Jordan Mason for that last lineup. We should throw Jordan Mason in. Maybe I'll throw him in the flex here because he is just.
Do we have Debo?
We don't have Debo in this one either.
Oh, no, the last one.
We have not played Debo yet, so we.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So some oversights with these lineups. I still think it was a fine lineup, pretty good one, but maybe I guess I was saying that I'm a little bit hesitant to play Connor with Kyren because I think there is slight negative correlation there between running backs in the same game. I still think I'm fine playing them together, but maybe this would be one where we take one of those out.
I think it is for a team that ranks bottom 3 in pass rate over expectation.
Arizona.
And and rushing touchdowns make up a big component of Kyler's projection.
Yeah. All right. So play Jordan Mason here. All right, we're looking good as far as salary goes. Tight end. Do we want to play Ertz in our Daniel stack? We've already got Luke McCaffrey in there.
I think we're okay. But I mean, like, tight end sucks so bad that you could justify it for sure.
Yeah, justify just like pair your tight end with your quarterback. Seems fine. You don't really
I'm like this week, I'm really fine just like playing Theo Johnson at 2,500, 2,600 and taking a 0.
That could be our bring back, actually. Let's do that.
Yeah.
I mean, he ran a lot of routes last week. We didn't even talk about him, but seems fine as a bring back in a Washington stack in particular. Not like a player I'm targeting heavily, but he was the more used tight end for New York last week.
Theo and no neighbors?
Just to fill that tight end spot. That's so gross. All right, so now we do have Jordan Mason. I think we could play Mason and Debo without the quarterback just fine. So let's play them both in this one. Now we've got tons of money left over. We can play whoever we want in the flex. Do we want to play CeeDee Lamb? We're still going to have too much money left over. But who's your favorite pay up here?
Cup Debo.
Maybe let's take Ty Johnson out of this. So again, I played my guy. I'm taking him out again because we still have too much money left over. So this is now we're still in a good spot. So we have Debo in there. We have Theo Johnson. Now we have 11,000 left over. If we choose our defense here, we can kind of see maybe this would be another running back with the defense kind of thing. So go. We might still have too much money for that.
Henry Ravens.
Yeah, it's just we still have money left over, but actually only 600. All right, I was thinking the Ravens. Okay, yeah. So that is fine. We could just end here. If we wanted to, we could replace Theo Johnson, lose that little bit of correlation, pick up a little bit of projection.
Oh yeah,
at tight end.
You could play Akins or Shoemaker.
You really don't want to play Parkinson. Looks like I guess we have
or Parkinson. No, I just forgot he was 3,100. I don't know if that should be like an outside the box rule, is where you just never play the chalk tight end. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just like it worked out last week.
Yeah. No, I think this is really, really strong lineup. We don't have a bring back, but we've got just Jaden Daniels, single stack with Luke McCaffrey, rocket ship there. We've got Jordan Mason, Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Jordan Akins. I feel like it's a nice mix of chalk and less chalky options, with Luke McCaffrey really coming in at virtually zero ownership. Other than McCaffrey, we're getting some ownership on all of our players, but that's pretty low owned. I think that's a solid lineup.
Well, maybe because tight end is so gross, you kind of have to stack your quarterback to a tight end the opposing tight end. Yeah, I don't know. All right, you want to meet him? Start us off.
Oh yeah. Let's do another one.
Last one, because this is 5 hours long.
We could just go forever. But no, we'll just do one more, and then we'll be done.
Dak, Anthony Richardson, or I don't know, Purdy.
Anthony Richardson.
All right, that's who I was hoping you were going to say. I don't know why. And we'll throw AD Mitchell in there. We might not end up with a Jalen Naylor team, so you guys at home better play him. We'll do Kyron, Deebo, Kupp. See if we can get that to work.
Do we want Jordan Mason in this one? Where's
No. We'll do Najee, Steelers, D. We'll do Theo for now. Or Shoemaker. There he is.
Who's your preference?
Shoemaker for now. And then what do we have at the flex? Aaron Jones. Oh, Chris Godwin. All right, done. Game over. Young money.
Game over. Easy game. The easiest game. Beautiful. Look at that. There you go. 3 lineups. Well, how long has this show gone? 2.5 hours so far.
Can you believe that?
Yeah,
Might be a new record.
Yeah, that is. We went pretty long last year. Sometimes we went long again this one, but it was fun. A lot to talk about on this slate. We have a lot of pretty good value on the slate. A little bit of chalk, but nobody too crazy. I thought that was fun. Enjoyed doing the show. Enjoyed pissing Scott off to no end. Maybe we'll be back next week. Scott, what else do you have going on this weekend?
Excited to, I don't know, watch the games. Oh, I got the show with Johnny tomorrow morning, so early in the morning.
God.
Because he has a baby, so we gotta do it butt crack of dawn. And so yeah, I'm excited to hear Johnny tell me the plays he disagrees with, the plays we're in line on. Sometimes he has like a magical all-in play he doesn't tell me about until Sunday morning, and that guy always goes nuclear at 1% ownership. So be on the lookout.
That's
for
fun.
that. Yeah.
All right, and that's behind the paywall.
Yep.
All right. So make sure you are subscribed to Fantasy Points. Use the little promo box in the bottom or promo code OTB20 to get 20% off whatever at Fantasy Points. Really appreciate all of your kind comments here. Thank you all very much. Mysteries. At least you don't have to do another show with Neil tomorrow. Yeah. So at least you have that going for
Neil,
you.
I love you so much, but I had to pee for 2 hours and 24 minutes straight. So.
All right. Well, I'm glad that you were able to get your pee. Scott, that's why I always have you noticed that I always take a piss last minute.
I know, it's so smart.
Yeah, that's good. Pro tip right there.
Pro tip.
If you're gonna go for 2.5 hours, go piss before the show. All right. This was a lot of fun, Scott. We will be back next week. That was a joke. We're gonna be back next week. This was a lot of fun. Thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you then.
What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.